Hey everybody, welcome to the Max Frequency Podcast, episode 10. It is the most wonderful time of the year. It's E3 time. It's summer. Video game news has happened. And I have none other than Jerrad Wyche here to talk with me all about it. Hey, Jerrad.
Hey, how's it going, Max?
I feel so good, Jerrad. I was talking about my job earlier, which hasn't been good the last 2 days with IT issues. But the video game side of things, I am flying high. I was playing this, what is this song called? It's like Come On the Train or Come On and Ride the Train. Or it's some hype song. I was playing it yesterday in the apartment before Nintendo's E3 presentation, and my wife Abby thought I was crazy. I tried to get a hype choo-choo out of her, but she wouldn't participate. It is... I love E3. I love E3 so much.
I'm glad to have it back, man. In any capacity, like, obviously there's some pitfalls to it this year. Some things weren't great. Some things were incredible. I'm just glad to have it back in any capacity, and obviously I hope next year it's better and gets back more to the form it was before COVID, but I'm just glad to have it back.
It... Just compared to last year, having it essentially drag out for 3-4 months, compared to just having it pretty much mostly condensed here to the traditional, weekend and first half of the week. I mean, I know EA is at the end of the month, and God only knows if PlayStation will say anything here in the summertime. But it just feels so good to have it more condensed than before, because last year it was, I mean, understandably, we didn't have a proper E3. I get that, but just having it like sprinkled throughout summer was not ideal at all. I get everyone was trying.
Yeah, and it just felt so like mismanaged in many ways, and there was so much over the course of so long that the messaging was kind of lost along the way too, where I don't know if you were the same way, but for me it was hard remembering what exactly was announced because we were inundated with information often and constant, and it was just like over and over and over.
It was like, was this announced? When was this announced? I feel like that was forever ago. Oh, that was only a month ago? What? This
it was last week.
Yeah, this is so much more fun. It's been better, and I wanted to have you on the show. We've done E3 together for years, on and off throughout. I've joined you on Controlled Interests for Xbox and PlayStation type discussions. I think you've even been on my old podcast with Logan Moore, Millennial Gaming Speak, which I believe is where you and I first met through the power of the internet. If I remember everything
through the power
correctly.
of the internet, yeah.
So E3, really, my goal for this episode, and you know this, Jerrad, but for the listener, the goal here is to specifically talk Nintendo and Xbox. Jerrad is like my go-to Xbox guy. If I have a question about Xbox, I go to Jerrad. And so I really wanted him here to talk about it because they had a really heavy show, I think is a really good way to put it. A lot of games, a lot of news, big stuff. They're making moves, continuing to do so. And then Nintendo, I could talk about Nintendo forever. So I thought that'd be really fun. But to kind of kick it off here, just to start, what were your overall thoughts? I mean, Ubisoft did stuff. There was Summer Games Fest with Jeff Keighley. Who else went? I'm like, it's so hard to remember everyone who went. I think Gearbox did something. Capcom.
There was a PC gaming show, future game show.
Let's
so many things.
E3, 3 press conferences, please. Let's get back to that. That would be great. I know that won't happen, but
so in terms of how I feel about the shows, I think Xbox and Nintendo are the only ones that justified their presence there. And as we'll get into later, I wasn't super into everything at Nintendo's Direct, but that doesn't mean I didn't think they had a great presentation. I think they did a really good job with it. It's kind of how you have to separate yourself sometimes, is these press conferences aren't meant to have everything interest you specifically, but in terms of pacing and what they're announcing and what it means for the overall picture of the brand or the publisher. So yeah, Nintendo and Xbox I think killed it. Square Enix,
I forgot about them.
I think did okay. Like, for me, I tweeted about this. I said, it's if you would have told me that in 2021 Square Enix would have a presentation and their best shown game was their Western title and their Japanese stuff kind of didn't hit, I'd be shocked, because obviously that's where Square's bread and butter is with Final Fantasy and especially Platinum Game stuff that they publish, and a lot of that didn't show very well. PC Gaming Show and the Future Games Show I think were pretty bad in terms of presentation. Some of my favorite presentations during the weekend were Day of the Devs, which is by Tim Schafer's studio Double Fine, where they basically have a bunch of indie devs. What do you say?
So technically Xbox?
Technically Xbox, yeah. But the way they handle it is really cool, where they let all these indie developers submit an application of their indie game, and then they pick the ones that they think are the best of the best, and then they have their own conference with it. And so many dope indie games I saw there at the Day of the Devs. The Wholesome Direct was really cute. Not all of those games spoke to me, but I thought that went at a really good pace. The Guerrilla Collective was pretty decent. Capcom's was a train wreck. They shouldn't even have done one. It just is pointless. Which is a bummer, because that new Professor Layton game, well, not new, it's getting ported over, I guess, to the West for the first time.
Yeah.
It looked cool for what it was, but it got muddied into all of this other stuff that people weren't having it, right? People were already tired of the presentation by the time those things even popped up. Mm-hmm. So I really hope that next year it returns more to what we expect, and these presentations kind of find their way. I didn't mention Ubisoft. Theirs was okay. It was inoffensive. Yeah, it was inoffensive, which is, I guess, as good as you can ask for with the types of stuff they showed off. But for me, if Square Enix just gave their Guardians thing to Xbox, or maybe even Summer Game Fest with Keighley, which I also thought was a pretty good show for the first time, I think a lot of these other publishers just didn't need to have a presentation, and it showed. And thank God Xbox and Nintendo showed up with what we wanted and expected. And it's because of how bad all the other presentations were, it makes me miss Sony. Just because I want a third competent presentation there that's like full of, nostalgia and hype in equal measures. But overall, like we said at the jump, I'm happy it's back. I don't think I wasted my time this weekend, which is the most important thing. I mean, I didn't watch the Koch Media presentation, which apparently was the biggest train wreck of all of them. But yeah, I'm stoked to talk about Nintendo and Xbox, because those are the ones that really spoke to me. Good weekend for video games.
I think what we were talking about earlier, where just it's nice to have the spirit of E3, like just this summer week of games, helped alleviate some of the letdowns in some of these shows. Like Ubisoft, I think I'm a bit more forgiving, because it was caught up in the hype and the spirit of everything. I thought Rainbow Six Quarantine actually looked fairly interesting for like a team co-op shooter.
Max Extraction. It's called Extraction now. You can't use the word quarantine.
You're absolutely right. It's Extraction now. It is. What was that other Rainbow? I think it was Rainbow Six Patriot, which was a Game Informer cover for before Siege, and like that game's a lot. Anyway, you're absolutely right. It's Extraction. Aliens. I'm glad they went Aliens instead of zombies or something. At least Aliens feels a bit fresher in this space. I was happy about that. Pandora, I was actually surprised about. I forgot that they were doing that. Entirely.
Sorry to cut you off. Did you read about why that game is important to Ubisoft and Massive Entertainment, the developers?
Beyond Disney dollars, no.
So see, it's funny you say Disney dollars. You remember the report that came out that Massive's going to be working on a live service Star Wars game that's going to come out after the exclusive deal?
I do.
So the reason they got that deal, it came out, and I'm sorry I'm not sourcing I follow so many journalists in the video game realm on Twitter. Apologies. But apparently what had happened is, when Disney was coming in to check on the progress of the Avatar game that was licensed outright, they were really pleased with the quality of the game, and that's when they struck the deal for the Star Wars game, where it's like, hey, we're looking to other studios outside of EA to work on Star Wars titles. You guys are doing a really good job with this. We trust you guys. Do you guys want to make a Star War? And obviously Ubisoft's like, dollar signs? Sure.
Yeah,
so that's why they landed that deal, is because this Avatar game, I guess behind closed doors, Disney was confident in the product they're putting together. So that's cool.
I've actually really enjoyed, for the most part, how Disney has been handling dishing out its properties lately. Especially Marvel.
John Drake, who's formerly at Sony, got hired on by Disney to handle all the licensing that's non-Marvel, which we kind of saw the fruits of that labor in the Xbox show. But yet, to your point, the Marvel stuff too, incredible the way they're handling that.
Yeah, Marvel's getting passed around really well. Indiana Jones is over at Machine Games and Bethesda. It's just, I like the way they seem to be passing things around and sharing them, and I'm excited to kind of see the fruits of all this labor and stuff. And it's funny, Avatar's kind of become a joke or a meme at this point, just because it's been how many years since the first one, and we're still waiting for the sequels that have been in work forever. It's just kind of funny, but the game visually looked super impressive, just striking graphical fidelity there.
Yeah, it's one of those tough things where it's hard to recognize the gameplay, and you can see spurts of it. I mean, there's a moment where one of the is it, I can't remember. Is it the name of the alien race Avatar?
They are Na'vi.
Na'vi. When the male, I'm assuming it's a male Na'vi, is in the jungle area, and those like rhino-like creatures are running away when the military ships are coming in. Mm-hmm. You see a brief snippet of what seems to be possible gameplay where he like slides under this like tree branch. So I'm curious to see if it is first person or third person. I didn't look into it. Maybe there's a press release. But if it is this type of game where, I mean, we don't really know. I was talking on my own podcast about this of, I'm super in if it's a single-player open-world type experience, and I'm not even a big Avatar guy just because the world looks so cool. If it ends up being a live service multiplayer thing, one, I'm going to have a hard time convincing my friends because of the meme that Avatar is.
Yes.
And two, I don't know if I'm super interested in, you know, being on either the side of the Na'vi or the side of the military. Like, I don't think anybody wants to be on the military side, right? It would boring.
It would feel like something was missing. Like no one would want to join I mean, people do want to join bad guys in games, but it just seems like an Avatar that wouldn't necessarily be the case. I'm curious. I'm very cautiously optimistic. The visuals were the most striking thing to me. I was actually incredibly impressed. It's been a while since I've been that kind of floored by an Ubisoft game visually. I feel like Assassin's Creed's all kind of look the same and whatnot, but this what do they call it? Snowdrop? Is that their engine?
The Snowdrop engine. It's the one they use for the Division 2. It's Massive's engine. So it's going to be the same one they're going to use for the Star Wars game, which I mentioned a little while ago. And that gets me excited, because even if this isn't what I want and I don't want to play this game, knowing that the Star Wars game is in the pipeline for Massive, I'm like, hell yeah. If it's going to look like this, I'm in.
Yeah, me too. The other thing kind of from Summer Games Fest, there were two, I thought, mostly notable parts from Summer Game Fest. Kind of a hit or miss part, depending on the pacing, with Jeff Keighley there. He always sometimes goes a bit long in the tooth, especially when he throws music in there. But anyway, there were Elden Ring was his kind of big get. Good for him. And then they also did Death Stranding Director's Cut with Kojima, which talk about tease after tease after tease, which is so Kojima. It kicks off with just him talking to Kojima, who brings up 9/11, which kind of felt weird. It's like, all right,
twice.
Kojima.
Bring it up twice.
Like, just trying to figure out my game. And, you know, I'm down for whatever Kojima's doing, so I can slide that off. And then he's like, but I do have one thing to tease. And then all of a sudden, the PlayStation Studios logo pops up. And I went, there goes the tears of thousands of Xbox fanboys. And then I remembered, oh, wait, Death Stranding's coming to PS5. Because it felt like in that moment, very briefly, that they were revealing, like he was doing the Kojima tease of his next game. And it was a PlayStation game again. But Death Stranding coming to PS5, Director's Cut, did a whole Metal Gear Solid, straight up Metal Gear Solid tease for Death Stranding. It just seems very weird.
I would call it a troll at this point. I don't know if it'd be a tease. I think it was a troll.
Well, it could. If it means nothing, if there is no Metal Gear to speak of, then yes, a troll would be fitting. But could be teasing it a little bit more. If you buy into that, you know, there's possibility of a Metal Gear Solid remake from Blue Point, and you know, Konami possibly sharing there's a lot of stuff kind of floating around, but it just felt too much like Metal Gear to not involve Konami, and I'm just, I don't know, I was losing my mind a little bit in like this kind of fun, antsy way. But the real thing here is Elden Ring. Did you play Death Stranding?
No, I didn't play Death Stranding, and it's not because I'm against playing a Kojima game. To me, it was a weird game, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not like, I know some people were super in no matter what day one because of Kojima. I know some people, even though they had no idea who Kojima was, love Norman Reedus. Mm-hmm. I like Norman Reedus as much as the next person. Shout out to Daryl from The Walking Dead. But it just isn't something that captured me. And then when I saw reviews, not that it reviewed poorly, but it didn't seem like an experience I wanted to have necessarily.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I don't know if I am not going to go and hop into it on a backlog play when I get a PS5 eventually, whenever that happens. I just never got around to it. I've never actually played a Metal Gear or Metal Gear Solid game, period. And once again, it's not because of a lack of interest. It's just not the thing I was into growing up in terms of looking for video games. Right. You're probably similar to me, where I had maybe 1 or 2 video games a year that I was able to get. Being a huge sports kid, I always made sure to get Madden every year because I love American football. And then other than that, it was the random Spyro, Crash, all these things. So I kind of just missed out on a lot of the PS1 and PS2 JRPGs and also all the Metal Gear Solid stuff. I just wasn't connected to that. So by the time I got older, I had no connection to Kojima or any of it. I respect him fully. I understand what he's done for the industry. I get the legacy. I have plenty of friends like you, Logan, and many others who love Metal Gear Solid and Kojima. It's just something that ships passing in the night.
Yes, that's actually, quite frankly, the way I am with Bethesda games and Todd Howard. Like, I understand fully what Todd Howard has done, and we're going to talk about him and Bethesda and what they're doing later, but I fully understand the grasp of what both Bethesda and Todd Howard have done for the video game industry, but like those games totally passed me by, and I get it, but I haven't played it, and I don't have a desire to for the so anyway, Death Stranding, game I revisited before The Last of Us Part 2. It kind of like, all right, I'm gonna drop this down to easy and just play, and ended up loving it. If I had played it in 2019, it would have been my game of the year that year. It was a very unique experience, and it's rare to get such a big AAA budget second-party title like that, and that's so different from everything else. It was fun. But the real kind of as I said before, Elden Ring, the next Miyazaki... I'm blanking on the studio name. It just
From Software.
Thank you. It just left my brain. From Software's next big game, George R.R. Martin is somehow associated with it, I guess from the narrative and world design perspective. They showed off a really cool trailer, and they gave it a date, which I really wasn't expecting a date. It's January something, right?
21st.
January 21st, 2022. So really only 6 months away. Or 7, I guess. 7 months.
I don't know if you've learned this from me, just us being friends across the internet and being on podcasts and stuff, but like From Software is my favorite developer. I would argue that they're one of the best developers right now in terms of both their level of quality and their level of quantity. There's an argument to be made for the Naughty Dogs of the world that put out these incredible quadruple A games, but you get those 4 to 5 years apart, whereas with From Software you get these very high quality games that maybe don't reach the mark of an Uncharted title, but pretty damn close, and you get a lot of those games in a quicker turnaround, right? I just love From Software. I love their game design. I love their intricate ways that they take the Metroidvania style of level crafting and work that into their stuff. With this game specifically, obviously it has open world elements to it, and the thing I'm excited about is third-person action-adventure games existed long before the days of Demon's Souls or Dark Souls. But From Software was able to take that genre and make it their own and make it distinct and make it feel like a From game. And obviously we've gotten a lot of clones since then, a lot of Souls-like titles. And I'm curious to see... Exactly. And I'm curious to see what they do with open world, because they're not just making bigger arenas for you to fight in. There's going to be interesting gameplay decisions that are made that feel distinctly From Software, while still it seems like getting the intricate, narrow hallway style design that we're used to in previous titles. At the beginning of the trailer, you see this like 4-legged stone turtle thing with a bell on its stomach. And Vata Vidya, who's a very popular YouTuber who covers Souls lore and Bloodborne lore and all that stuff for From Software games, he actually went through a frame-by-frame rewatch of the trailer, and above that you can see that there's a castle on that creature's back, right? Like a building.
Oh my god.
And I wouldn't put it past From Software that thing, since it's an open world and it moves, there's probably a point in which you can get onto the back of that creature, and that's an optional building you can get into. I'm just excited. We talked about this on my own post E3 show of that trailer would have been enough. I didn't need a date. I didn't expect a date, frankly. Right. But for us to get that is huge. And I know some people are concerned, is it going to get delayed? Is it going to make it? Which is totally a possibility. But from my knowledge, and I can be corrected on this, since the first Dark Souls, I don't think From's ever delayed a game once it had a release date. And obviously, different circumstances now, completely possible. But with that date, I think they're pretty confident in it. And earlier this year in 2020, 2021, COVID there kind of threw me off the years.
Time is a flat circle.
We had a report that they were in the polishing phase, and they were actually pushing to put it out this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if it is game complete, right? And they can play through the game from start to finish, and they're just polishing the game and getting it ready and taking that extra time instead of forcing it out early. And going to the George R. R. Martin stuff, the way I've had it explained to me through the Miyazaki interview that he had with IGN and other sources is that George R. R. Martin kind of built the skeleton for the narrative in terms of the lore and the world building. And then From Software went in there with their environmental storytelling and the way they tell lore through the item descriptions and kind of filled out the meat of the body, the organs, the skin, all of that stuff. That's how it was explained to me, and I'm excited because barring how Game of Thrones ended, at least the TV show.
TV show, yes.
I still love the way George R. R. Martin writes and creates worlds. And From Software, obviously, I've loved the way they've done stuff since Dark Souls. I wasn't in on Demon Souls. So I'm excited for this. We'll get into this throughout the show, but 2022 is a jam-packed year, hoping nothing slips. I mean, even Horizon might be in 22 alongside God of War if it doesn't come out this year.
Possibly, yeah, absolutely.
Or even Halo.
We're going to talk about Halo.
2022 can be a very packed year, and Elden Ring is my most anticipated game with a bullet just because of what From does, and I'm excited to see them try a new genre. And I'm itching, honestly, after watching that trailer, Max, I went and started up Sekiro again, another playthrough, because I'm just itching to get back into a From Software title, and yeah, I just love that developer so much.
I've gotten to the Cleric Beast and beaten it. That's kind of my From Software experience. So I don't.
Funny enough, never played Bloodborne. I own it. I need to get to it. It's the one From game since Dark Souls I haven't played or beaten.
Well, if it's anything like everyone else says, I'm sure you'll love it. So it's Elden Ring just seems very cool to me in the idea that From seem to be. I feel fairly confident in saying this. Masters of gameplay execution, of controls and just tight gameplay, and taking that action role-playing kind of exploration, difficulty, all of that tight gameplay stuff, and implementing that into some form of an open world. It sounds like there's different areas that are guarded by certain lords or bosses, like controlled kind of domains, and you're going to go in and take them over, but you can go in whatever way you want, is kind of what I've been seeing. Sounds fascinating for them. It's almost akin to Breath of the Wild in a way. When you heard that Nintendo was going to take Zelda and make it an open world game, you're like, how's that going to work? That's an interesting idea. And I think that train of thought can kind of apply here as well. From Software, what kind of games they make. I mean, like I said, they've invented a genre essentially, and now they're going to apply that to an open world design. And I think that is where a ton of potential lies for them in this, to kind of push this thing that they've helped create even further. And you're right, they crank these games out, man. It's crazy. They are like Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro, and am I forgetting one? I feel like there's one more. Demon Souls remake, that was Blue Point. Maybe I'm not forgetting one. Maybe that is it.
Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro. I mean, there's Deracine, which was the VR game, which isn't actually a
right. Yeah, that's different.
That they had come out. Yeah, and those are all like, for a while there, it was year after year. Like Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3 were a year apart, and then Sekiro came out like 16, 18 months after Bloodborne. Crazy.
Yeah, they're
and this I think was originally scheduled to come out shortly after too. You know what I mean? But obviously with COVID and everything, I think lent itself at the delay of it. It's really impressive what they've been able to do in such a short time period between each release. Their creature and character design is wild. Yeah. They're so good at doing it. This. People often accuse a lot of their games of feeling similar, which is kind of odd to me because Dark Souls, Demon Souls kind of feel similar. I think Bloodborne is very unique. I think Sekiro is very unique. And this, though it has the rumblings of Dark Souls, it is different enough for people who are familiar with Dark Souls that it isn't the same thing. And I love the variety of bosses we even saw in this one trailer, where you saw this king with multiple arms on its back who seems like, you know, the fallen king trope. There was like a Valkyrie character that you saw killing the player. There was one of my favorite designs, it's only in the trailer for a brief second, is you see this werewolf type knight howling at the moon. And for those who are familiar with Dark Souls, it totally has an Artorias of the Abyss design with a werewolf head. And for, I don't know if you know this, Max, but like Artorias is like the Mario of From Software. It's like the most well-known character that they've ever had. It's like the fan favorite character.
Okay.
So it's no surprise that they would twist that and turn it on its head and have a character in this game that is evocative of Artorias, but slightly different. It's just we didn't even talk about the mount. That's new for From Software. There's never been a mount in any of their games. There's a double jump mechanic, which you could jump in Sekiro and then you could grapple hook, so that's new. They're just really good at building on the stuff that they've already nailed, and for those who have played their catalog of games, you see parts of Sekiro in this, you see parts of Bloodborne, you see parts of Dark Souls, and I do think that this, despite Sekiro winning Game of the Year and a lot of their games are reviewing well and having, you know, beloved audiences, I think this could be their big pop with the general gaming audience as a whole.
Right.
Because even though it's going to have the level of difficulty From does, I think an open world is a little bit more inviting than the more linear stuff that they've done in the past. And to your point, as for me, somebody who, and we'll get to this later when we talk Nintendo, I wasn't a huge Breath of the Wild person. I gave it a try, didn't click with me. I know I'm in the vast minority on that, but I'm excited to play Breath of the Wild from Software, because it might have the gameplay mechanic hooks that feel better to what I enjoy playing a video game, as opposed to what everyone got out of Breath of the Wild, which I just didn't connect with. So that's why I'm excited too. And I'm very excited for the sequel to Breath of the Wild, and we'll get to that. But I can't wait for Elden Ring. I'm so excited we got a date. Does it get delayed? Maybe. But if it doesn't, we're going to have a great start to next year in January.
Yeah, we are. Let's dive right into that sequel to Breath of the Wild. Let's just use that as a segue. Nintendo closed their E3 Direct with the sequel to Breath of the Wild. I personally refuse to call it Breath of the Wild 2 because that won't be the name of the game. But I get that, like, SEO purposes, it's easier to just call it Breath of the Wild 2. The sequel got some footage, very evocative of Skyward Sword. It looks like they're bringing presumably the game world of Hyrule from Breath of the Wild, and they're adding floating islands above it. The possibilities there are theoretically endless of just how you navigate that world and fly around. And, well, we have a Loftwing. Are there flying companions? There looks to be some sort of time manipulation that seems really dope and kind of in the vein of how they were... Breath of the Wild used physics in a way of, you know, ice, magnesis, stasis to kind of manipulate the environment, solve puzzles, and kind of create the sandbox that they did. Adding time manipulation seems to make sense in that vein, and is also very Zelda, which has been playing with time since Ocarina of Time. So it's they closed it, and they have claimed a 2022 release year. I don't buy that for a second. I think this is a 2023 game.
What were their exact words? We're aiming for 2022, right? Is what Anuma said.
We're aiming for 22. And if you've been following Zelda for any amount of time, you know, whatever they announce, just add a year. It is I would love for this game to come out next year. I thought it was actually quite silly for people to say earlier this year that Breath of the Wild 2 is this year. I was like, no, not a chance. It is. The game just looks gorgeous. It's more Breath of the Wild. It's not obviously coming to the Wii U this time, so there's theoretically a little bit more hardware potential to tap into. And also, I don't know if you noticed this, Jerrad, I haven't seen a lot of people talking about this. The footage on Nintendo's YouTube channel, 1080-60. The Switch. Breath of the Wild does not run at 1080-60 on the Switch. It doesn't run at 60 on the Switch. It doesn't run at 1080 on the Switch. I thought that was very interesting. I think that I really actually think that footage was Switch Pro, new Switch, Super Switch, whatever you want to call it. I think that was actually footage on the new hardware. And wouldn't be surprised if we get an announcement here in the coming months, if not weeks, about that piece of hardware. But back to Zelda, you weren't hot on Breath of the Wild. I know a couple of people that were kind of like you, just didn't click with them, and that's perfectly okay. I did love it. I also... I guess disclaimer, I worked on the IGN, I was part of the IGN wiki team for that, and they bought me my copy, a digital copy. I still have the collector's edition I bought. But anyway, for transparency's sake, what did you think of the sequel as someone who wasn't into Breath of the Wild? What did you think?
Okay, let me start with this. First of all, I don't want to yuck anybody's yum. Like, I totally get why people love this game, why it reviewed well. Like, I'm not trying to say, I'm not one of those people that's like, why did it review so well? It just didn't click with me. For, the narrative, I know that was, even in the reviews that said it was a great game, the narrative wasn't the strength of this game, right? It was the open world, It was the physics, it was the dynamic systems built into the game. I just felt that the world was a little bland for me as well. I just didn't find those levels of interest in the sandbox that they created for me to do stuff.
Sure.
And I wanted a little bit stronger of a narrative. I like when, Legend of Zelda nails its characters. And for me, I just didn't get a whole lot of that in terms of what I was looking for. And then I want more traditional dungeons. And I know even people who loved Breath of the Wild want those to return.
I'm one of those people.
To this game in some capacity. The weapon degradation was a huge killer for me. Now, that isn't a deal breaker for the sequel. If it still has that, that's fine. I'll deal with it. But in my opinion, I don't think it added to the game in a positive light. That being said, all the negatives out of the way. I think it was beautiful. Art style, in retrospect, doesn't hold up to me as well as it did when it originally came out, but this trailer that we got, especially assuming it's on the new Switch, I think it alleviates the muddiness in that art style, and it looks beautiful. You can even see it in the dynamic ways in which Link's hair is animated.
Yeah,
I love the new mechanic of like traversing upwards through like those like water puddle things and getting to the top. I wonder if, a big thing in the first game was climbing, and you did have your glider. And I wonder if with this being, second level above Hyrule, if the glider is going to play a big role, where there's probably going to be moments where there's, wind spouts where it'll push you up and you can kind of traverse from Sky Island to Sky Island. That's really cool. I want it to feel different enough that it justifies its existence. And what I mean by that is we saw moments in this where it looked very much like the map from the first Breath of the Wild, but obviously there's these really cool additions of the Sky Islands. And I hope there's more to that in various other biomes in it, where it's not just the hook isn't just the Sky Islands. And if it is just the Sky Islands, make them in every biome feel unique to that biome. And honestly, if they do that, they make the narrative a little bit stronger, and they add, in my opinion, better POI in terms of points of interest on the map and the traditional dungeons. I think this could honestly end up being one of my favorite games of all time. And I know it's kind of wild considering I didn't jive with the first game at all, but I saw the pieces there, and I could very much be in a place where this sequel is astounding to me, and I love it.
It does have that kind of potential as a sequel. It's interesting. It's kind of the first time since Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask that Nintendo has done a Zelda sequel like this, reusing the same assets, if not the entire same world. Now, Majora's Mask used assets but created a new world. And obviously the sky and those floating islands, we don't know how dense those are, how many of them are, how big they can be. It's very evocative of Skyward Sword, which actually really kind of makes this HD port coming out here next month, a bit more interesting if that ties in, like making that game accessible again to a new generation and a new groups of players by removing motion controls entirely, which was, I frankly and a lot of other people thought was impossible. I thought Skyward Sword would be trapped on the Wii forever. I can't wait to see how those feel, traditional button and stick controls to kind of move the sword and items around and stuff. But bringing that to the Switch, a incredibly popular system with a lot more, I think in general, the audience for the Switch is beyond just extreme casual gamers like the Wii was. It's gamers of all types, and I think there are more people interested in gaming than just, having your grandparents play Wii bowling and stuff. I think there are more people that are going to be into playing Skyward Sword this time around.
And to your point, Switch isn't a place where most people who would consider themselves more hardcore gamers that are playing maybe the From Software games, or, they buy every PlayStation exclusive first-party title. Most of those people that I know have a Switch. Like, they have a Switch, and they're playing Switch games alongside it. It's not, oh, you're a Nintendo person, you don't own a PlayStation or an Xbox, you only play Nintendo games. It kind of is like... it's not a bad thing, but it's a secondary thing for everyone where it's like, I'm either a PlayStation or an Xbox primary guy. Yeah. And I also have a Switch, Yeah. Like it's a need to have. Yeah.
My in-laws want a Switch, the last console they bought was an Xbox One S for my father-in-law. He plays Overwatch all the time. It's great. But before that, the last system they bought was a Wii. It's very targeting that. And anyway, the sequel seems very fascinating with the way that they're playing with time, visually, how it looks. It seems brighter, more colors, a bit more dynamic, and possibly it's new Switch footage, new hardware powering it. It's also kind of exciting to think that Nintendo's more willing to reuse older assets. And Breath of the Wild was a huge critical and commercial success, so obviously it's not hard to imagine business-wise, like, yeah, let's go back to this well. We have built this. Let's keep using it. So I'm very excited to see how this all shakes out. At 22, realistically, I think 23. We'll see. Can't wait for it, though. Super.
To your point about them reusing like assets and not being afraid of that, it makes me hopeful and excited and maybe a little bit like cautiously optimistic that they do the same thing with the Odyssey engine and all that stuff. And
that would be great.
So Super Mario Odyssey is my favorite Switch game. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I absolutely love it.
It's a titan.
As blasphemous as it sounds, it kind of passed Super Mario 64 for me in terms of being my favorite 3D Mario game. I was a madman. I collected all the moons. I just had a blast with it. I loved the engine. I loved Mario's mobility in it. And I've wanted a sequel with, a level based on Boo and the ghosts, and there's so many things that are potentially amazing that they could do with a follow-up.
You gotta wonder what the next 3D Mario, true 3D Mario, is going to be. And I'm curious how big Bowser's Fury is going to play into that design. How much of a...
Good point.
How much of that, if you could take that with Odyssey, that's fascinating. It's a little Galaxy-ish, little Odyssey-ish, little 3D world. I think something really interesting is going to happen with the next 3D Mario, and I think Bowser's Fury kind of offers a taste of that. But I don't know if we'll see it soon, because they did just give us Bowser's Fury and 3D World, and I know it's a port of a Wii U game with a small 4-hour add-on, a great tight 4-hour add-on. So I don't know when we'll see Mario. There were rumors of a 3D
and also
Donkey
save the
Kong.
reveal of a new Mario for the new Switch, right? It's going to sell that new Switch alongside Breath of the Wild 2, so why might as
just
well
like they did with the Switch the first time around in 2017.
Exactly.
Launch with Breath of the Wild and 3D Mario in the holiday. If they could do that again, that'd be killer. That would be awesome.
It'd be incredible.
So Nintendo really... their direct, first party wise, frankly, was very reminiscent of the Game Boy Advance. And I say that because Advance Wars is back, WarioWare is back, and Metroid is actually a lot. Metroid exists. So let's go to Metroid, because I don't know, Jerrad, if this was because I was just trying to protect myself, emotionally. But my E3 prediction this year, one of them was... a new Metroid game doesn't make an appearance at all. Not only did they acknowledge Metroid Prime 4 still exists and is in development at Retro, which, if you follow their job postings, is very clear that game is still in very active development. They were like, oh yeah, and here's a new Metroid game. Not only that, it's Metroid 5. It's coming out October 8th, just 3.5 months away. And, they're using the name Metroid Dread, which has been around for 16 years. As a Metroid fan, ever since I got Zero Mission as a birthday gift, holy smokes, I can't believe it. I've been losing my mind. What? I actually don't know. Are you a Metroid fan? Have you played these games? What's your relationship with Metroid?
So I've played Metroid and Super Metroid. Enjoyed both of them. a lot. But I'm not like a mega fan or super fan by any means, so I'm not that type of person, but I did enjoy them. I've actually been waiting for the Prime Trilogy to come out because we know they're holding it. It's kind of all been confirmed that they're kind of just holding on to it until they can have a firmer release date for 4. So the moment that comes out, I'm going to buy it and play it because I never got around to that when that trilogy came out, and I'm excited to hop in.
Yeah.
With Metroid Dread, and I don't want to yuck on anyone's yum, I didn't dig the art style, but what I will say is that for people who do love Metroid, it's dope that they're getting a brand new from the ground up Metroid 2D game for the first time in, I believe, 19 years, correct?
Yep, Fusion was the last one on the Game Boy Advance.
And the whole stalker approach to the AI in this game, that's kind of like the hook. I love that this game's coming out in October around Halloween because it does give me those horror vibes, right? The survival horror where this robot's kind of chasing Samus around. It looks really cool. Definitely not for me, but I'm glad it exists because all of my friends, just like you, who are super into Metroid, they lost it when this game got revealed, and I'm super excited for them to have something to play this fall and get excited for. So,
yeah, it was actually a buddy of mine had me record my reaction to the Direct because he actually thought he had read rumors about the Smash reveal, which didn't end up happening. There were heavy rumors that morning of Master Chief being the character, and he wanted to catch my reaction to that. And so for the first time ever, I recorded my reaction to any Direct or E3 presentation. I've never put a camera on my face and just done that. But I was very happy that I had it on for this particular moment. I obviously lost my mind. It's from Mercury Steam, and that is the team that did Metroid 2 Samus Returns, on the 3DS, which was a remake of the Game Boy game, and it added the counter ability, kind of more fluid in the free aiming. So that stuff comes back into Dread. Now there's a slide a la Mega Man, and it seems very fluid. It's running at 60 frames. I'm not sure. I think it'll be 1080p, I think. Sounds like it's actually probably done already. Nintendo's website says it's 6.9 gigabytes, so not very big file size at all. But Nintendo's the master of compression. So stoked that this game exists and is coming out soon. I love it. Not just when Nintendo does it or it's a game series that I love, but I love when a game is announced and it's and it's out in 3 months. It's out in 4 months. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that was the way with Fallout 4. They had the big grand reveal of Fallout 4 and they were and it's out.
Yeah, they were the first AAA to do that. It was hey, this is big presentation by Todd Howard. Oh yeah, it's coming out, in 3 or 4 months. Wild. Yeah,
I honestly would love it if all games were revealed that way. It would remove a lot of this. Look at Metroid Prime 4. That was announced Bayonetta 3 4 years ago, and we still haven't heard anything. And that's okay if the teams want to take time and create the game they want to do. And Metroid was rebooted, a year or two into development. So none of this is surprising. But it is more fun when a game is revealed, announced, and out super fast. So I'm incredibly excited. The other kind of first party stuff, there's a new Mario Party game, bringing back some N64 levels and 100, classic mini games or whatever. That seems really cool. You can actually pause in the middle of a game if you're playing online, which Nintendo with a forward thinking online component and Mario Party, what? I don't know. Who would have thought of that? WarioWare, get it together. That's the game. WarioWare's back. Advance Wars 1 and 2 are being remade. Were you a Game Boy Advance guy? Do any of these series speak to you in that way?
So my Game Boy Advance was a Pokemon and Advance Wars machine. Literally the only thing I ever played on were Pokemon games. Yeah, so I was stoked. I was actually worried when it was initially revealed of, is this a new Advance Wars? Because you never know if they're going to get it right or not. But then the moment they announced it was, a remake of 1 and 2 from the ground up, I'm not super sold on the art style. It's a little shiny toy box for me. I do love the animation of the characters themselves. Yeah. And I'm willing to give it a chance. December 3rd is, I believe, the date for this. I've wanted a new Advance Wars for a while, and not necessarily a brand new game, but just something to play on the Switch. And I was hoping maybe there was going to be a port or something. And to get this is more than I could ask for. Once again, not super sold on the art style, but because it's the games I loved playing, I'm down to just give it a shot and maybe fall in love with that art style the more I play it. And yeah, WarioWare's never been my jam. I always thought it was cool and weird in an awesome way. It just doesn't speak to me personally. But yeah, Advance Wars, super stoked about that.
Yeah, the art style kind of reminds me of the new Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes, a little chibi-ish.
Even like Let's Go a little bit. Yeah, I see that.
I'm excited for the Diamond and Pearl remakes, and I like that art style in that game, and I think Advance Wars it'll fit really well. I mean, of course, I would prefer really nice 2D, animated style, but I'm kind of down for this. I'm happy. I thought at first it was just going to be Advance Wars 1, but it's 1 and 2. I think it's called 1+2 Reboot, something like that.
Reboot Camp, I believe. Yeah,
Reboot Camp. So it's it's a cute name. Full blown 2 full games on Switch, perfect fit for portable or TV play. I'm really kind of glad that Nintendo is kind of digging a little bit in their back catalog of IP and kind of bringing some things to the Switch, which is on track to beat the Wii. And who knows if it'll beat the DS or PS2 or anything like that. But I mean, this is going to be a top 5, if not top 3 selling console of all time. Theoretically, it could. It has that track potential. And to bring these IP that have been either not on systems with huge hardcore and casual gamers, or not a huge platform at all. Look at the Wii U with like 3D World and stuff. To bring these games to a popular, successful platform that a lot of people want, I think could really kind of bring back a lot of these dormant franchises. Theoretically, dreams could come true. F-Zero could come back. Star Fox could get
Shout out to Nintendo for doing December releases too. Like no one really else does that. Advance Wars coming out December 3rd. They've, I think one of the Breath of the Wild DLCs came out in December, the year it came out. Mm-hmm. Nintendo's one of the few that doesn't, everything has to come out before Black Friday. Yeah, they're like, oh, we'll release a game in December. It's fine. Smash Bros. Right? Smash Bros. Ultimate came out in December. That's why it missed the Game Awards cutoff.
Yeah.
So they're not afraid of it, and I love it.
Yeah, and really most of this Direct was focused on games coming out the back half of this year. Metroid, WarioWare, Advance Wars, Mario Party. Like, really, we didn't know Nintendo's lineup up through Zelda here in July. And now suddenly the back half of the year is packed with a couple of teases for the rest of the year, like the sequel to Breath of the Wild or Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope, which was announced at Ubisoft's press conference, if not a few hours beforehand by someone accidentally. So it was really nice to see games coming out soon and show gameplay and trailers and kind of get people excited. And it makes sense because the Switch is in its 4th year, unlike PS5 and the Xbox Series consoles and stuff who just came out and they're still in that transition. And the Switch is in the prime of its life, so to speak, and this makes perfect sense. And it was cool to see that. Yeah,
for sure. Maybe it's about to get its second wind, right?
Yeah.
Presumably with the Switch Pro, so
I hope
it's hitting that sweet spot, and then it'll have a second life with this new hardware that's supposedly coming out. I'm their content for the Direct didn't all speak to me, but I'm glad they did it because they're willing to showcase some of these games that we talked about, which are the B tier of the Nintendo IP. But they're willing to give it a shot, whereas we've seen where's been Castlevania, right? Like, we have what's Konami done with that, and I'm glad that Nintendo's willing to do this. And they could have, if they didn't back these type of projects, it could have been a disappointing Direct. But because they doubled down on it, and if Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp sells well, maybe we do get a new one, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if WarioWare sells well, maybe they do some post-launch content, which I know is not common for Nintendo really, but maybe they change with that as they've added stuff to Mario Party and some other titles on the Switch's life cycle.
Yeah.
It's this, I think this Direct did a good job of being like, hey, you should still play your Switch and you should be happy that you own a Switch. And I think that's all you could ask for as a Switch owner, is that they give you reasons to buy games on it and continue to support it and make you feel good about making that purchase years ago or maybe even a month ago if you were lucky enough to get your hands on one.
Right. First party games weren't the only games shown off at the Direct. There was also second and third party stuff, and frankly, I think the most surprising one was the fact that the brand new Square Enix Guardians of the Galaxy game is coming to Switch. When that popped up in the Direct, I went, what? How? And it turns out that it is another cloud-based game, it sounds like, just like Hitman and Resident Evil 7, I believe, is like that in Japan. And there's one more big one that... Control. Control is also on the Switch through the power of the cloud. So, I mean, really cool that developers are willing to do that to get their... I think that speaks to the Switch popularity and like demand to have games on that platform, that developers are willing to... And maybe it's not so hard to engineer a cloud-based game these days with things like Stadia and xCloud and Luna. So maybe it's not as big of an ask as I'm picturing. I mean, it's hard. I'm not saying that making your game run in the cloud is easy, but bringing it to the Switch in that way maybe isn't as hard as I thought. But holy smokes, didn't really expect to see this game on the Switch.
And the funny thing here, too, is Square didn't bring Avengers via the cloud, which is an online game, whereas this is a single-player game. So I think that helps Guardians in that it is a single-player narrative experience where you're not demanding the controversial Nintendo Online services to try to work overtime on it. So I think that helps Guardians as well.
Definitely. We also saw a Life is Strange like kind of psych out where it was like, oh look, a 2D Life is Strange with a cool art style. Oh wait, nope, it's just those games are coming to Switch.
Weird that the new game, True Colors, is hitting day and date on the Switch on September 10th, but the remaster that's releasing everywhere else on September 30th just said releasing later this year.
Huh. I mean, yeah, I would have no idea how that... I mean, I understand prioritizing the new game hitting day and date. Like, that makes a ton of sense. But you would imagine that I don't know. You would assume the effort is somewhat similar to bring the remakes or remasters.
But it could be that the new game was developed from the beginning with the
Switch
idea of
in
it
mind.
being on Switch.
Yeah.
Whereas the remaster collection, because they're going back and retooling those older games, maybe it is more work, right? So
yeah,
that's probably why.
I've never made a video game in my life. I do not know how to do it. I just know it's hard. So forgive my ignorance, anyone who makes games. I really kind of think the other big Switch title kind of announced was, and I mentioned it earlier, the new Mario Rabbids game, Sparks of Hope. And man, what a bummer that Nintendo themselves hit the publish button like an hour too soon. Because at least I didn't know about it. Apparently this game has been kind of leaked for a while, at least the name of it and stuff. So maybe it wasn't as total of a surprise to a lot of people, but I definitely didn't know anything about it. And I would have been so pumped. Mario & Rabbids is a game that I've always loved the idea of, and I've even played a little bit of it at a friend's house. And I always say, I'll buy you. And it's on sale as we speak right now, Jerrad, $15 for the gold edition, which comes with the Donkey Kong DLC. But I just haven't pulled the trigger yet.
Pull the trigger. Yeah.
It is... I'm so happy that this game is getting another shot, that I don't know his name. I call him the Crying Man developer because, you know, he was so excited that his idea came. It was a very sweet moment. So I'm really happy that this game series is getting a second wind and that Ubisoft and Nintendo are continuing this partnership, because using Nintendo IP in a second party capacity, I think really helps bolster the Switch in a really great way that also lightens Nintendo's development load. And it's on and it's a great deal for Ubisoft because they get to use these. I mean, you put Mario on the box, everyone knows who Mario is. And frankly, everyone knows kind of what Rabbids are. So it's a really great team up there, and I'm excited to see this game. They showed off, was it pre-alpha, alpha? There was a lot of alpha footage this year.
Pre-alpha, that's what they titled it. Yeah, pre-alpha gameplay footage.
A lot of people were saying that it was like a lot of alpha footage at E3 this year. I think it was Imran? I may be saying his name wrong, but I believe
Imran Khan from Fanbyte?
Yes, thank you. Yeah. He even tweeted, he's like, man, this footage looks very pretty. I don't think that's running on a regular Switch. Now, I don't necessarily, like, yes, we all know that the Switch Pro is coming, and I'm sure a lot of footage, I was talking about Breath of the Wild, probably some footage this year was shown using that hardware, but they just couldn't say. But this
Schreier said the Mario plus Rabbids stuff was on the new Switch.
See, and
He tweeted that out. Yeah.
I just think it's interesting that I don't know where you fall, but it's pre-alpha footage. Like, the polish on this game isn't coming till the back half of its dev cycle, like toward the end. Like, this is clearly not representative of this game's art style and direction and the power of the Switch Pro. I mean, there were a couple cool like screenshots and stuff, but really this looked like it could run on a Switch. Like, this didn't scream Switch Pro to me. Not to like downplay that at all, but this is pre-alpha. Like, I'm not expecting any alpha footage to like knock me out.
Yeah, I think it was the subtleties in it in comparison to the original game for people who had played that. I think it was a little bit more clear. For me, I was like, this game looks cool. It doesn't look too different in terms of visual fidelity than the first one. I wasn't saying like, oh god, this is the Nintendo Switch Pro. I didn't even really get that with Breath of the Wild 2 necessarily. And to your point, it's because these games aren't, at the finish line yet. They're still polishing. They're still working on stuff. And yeah, Jason Schreier, these other journalists saying like, oh, that was on Pro or this was on Pro. It's like, that's cool. It didn't really like drastically affect my interpretation of what was shown by any means.
Yeah, I walked away from Rabbids not going, wow, that looks incredible. It was more like, wow, that's going to be really fun, I think. Like, I'm excited to see more. It wasn't... And again, it's pre-alpha.
Ubisoft, man. Poor Ubisoft. They have stuff leak every year, and the one year where nothing really leaked, Nintendo is the one that kind of drops the bag. And though it was known beforehand, to the general consensus, it wasn't an Assassin's Creed style thing. I still think you had to be super in the know to know that there was like little tidbits of this game being out there, because I didn't even know about the name, and I consider myself somebody who follows rumors and leaks and stuff pretty closely, and I never saw that stuff until the day it leaked for everyone, essentially. So
it's always a bummer, especially so close when something leaks like that, and something so kind of new and exciting. Like, I honestly wasn't really expecting a sequel to Mario and Rabbids, and I'm really glad that it sold well enough for both companies to do another one. So I'm super happy.
I wonder if the Starlink team gets a Star Fox game.
Maybe. It depends on how great this relationship between the two are, but they pretty much made one with Starlink. If they could do a full-fledged top-to-bottom Star Fox game without the toy stuff also kind of floating around it, like, just have Nintendo make a couple of amiibo. Nintendo already has the means to do that. Like, they could make a really cool flying Star Fox game.
And I know our friend Logan's going to hate me for this, but, I mean... might as well give them the chance. They can't get worse at this point. Like, give them a chance. Let them try their hands at Star Fox, and maybe we get something dope.
Yeah, one could hope. One could hope indeed. Please bring Star Fox back. Hope maybe next year. Who knows? So overall, I mean, you've talked about it a little bit, kind of here and there throughout this time, that not every Nintendo release really hit with you, which is totally fine. But kind of what are your overall thoughts, just kind of reception to Nintendo's showing here at E3 2021?
So I like to move on the grade scale, right? We're all familiar with that. We went to school here. Well, at least if you went to school in the United States, the England and stuff probably grades things differently. For us, the traditional American scale, the red, white, and blue grade scale, I would have to give it probably a B+. And the only reason it doesn't reach an A is because there wasn't enough stuff that spoke to me specifically to give it an A. In terms of presentation, pacing, there was a couple of weird pacing things, but like nothing that like drastically shook the show in any major way. I do think it's a bummer that it was hey, we're still working on Metroid Prime 4. I know they had to say it. They definitely had to say it, especially with them announcing Metroid Dread. But, it's just a bummer for people who are excited for that game. It just sucks. And the other thing I want to mention is I'm not even a huge Legend of Zelda guy. My co-host on my podcast, Dominic Orlando, is a very big Legend of Zelda fan. And he is pretty bummed at the way they're celebrating Zelda's anniversary this year.
Yeah.
That he kind of rolled his eyes into the back of his head at the Game & Watch announcement. Even Anuma in the presentation said, we don't have any games or content, but we do have this. And here's your Game & Watch to celebrate. Jeff Grubb from GamesBeat kind of tweeted after the show saying that the reason we didn't see Wind Waker or what's the other remake of the Legend of Zelda game they have? Yeah, that we didn't see those is because Nintendo's unsure if we're going to get Breath of the Wild next year, and they're kind of holding that to kind of, fill
honestly,
that Legend of Zelda
smart.
says hole.
Honestly,
Yeah,
smart.
for sure. It's the same thing with the Prime, Metroid Prime, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I understand why they're holding the trilogy. It's a very good marketing move. I totally get it. Bummer for consumers because we just want to play the games, but as a business top down, I totally understand. But overall, I think it's good. I was worried, honestly, Max, that we weren't going to get Breath of the Wild 2 when they went into that Zelda segment. When I first saw the Hyrule Warriors thing, I was like, this is how they're ending.
It was so good. It was the greatest tease ever.
I was like, oh god, this is how they're ending. And then they went to Skyward Sword. I'm like, okay, they're ending on Skyward Sword because that's the new release coming for Legend of Zelda. And then they went to the Game & Watch. I'm like, there's no shot they end on the Game & Watch. No shot. And Anuma delivered, and they gave us a date. Obviously, a little cagey with the aiming for. But top to bottom, I think they did what they needed to do. I thought it was a solid direct. Not anything crazy in terms of hype outside of Metroid Dread, but that doesn't speak to everybody. Metroid doesn't sell like many of the other major Nintendo franchises do.
Hopefully it does now.
Oh, yeah, hopefully. And I think the trilogy for Metroid Prime and this, too, will go a long way in doing that with the Switch's popularity. I thought it was really good. I enjoyed watching it, and it met all of my expectations, even though stuff didn't speak to me. I thought it was a really good show.
Awesome. Yeah, I loved it. From a critical perspective, I thought they had really tight games. They showed off trailers and gameplay for most, especially the first-party stuff, which really speaks to me when I see gameplay for stuff, especially new things like Metroid. If they had just shown a trailer for Metroid, like just a traditional, like, here's the trailer, I would have, of course, been excited because Metroid lives. But seeing gameplay, and especially, I really love the Treehouse segment. I think it's so smart of Nintendo. They're like, and they've been doing this since 2016, 2015, if not sooner, where they're like, you just watched our direct, our digital presentation, whatever it was called at the time. Now let's show you the game. And they dive right in. And the first thing in the Treehouse was Metroid Dread, and they were showing off gameplay and stuff. And I really love that approach that Nintendo has, where they leverage the hype that they generate to keep that train going and keep the conversation going around their games throughout the week. The Treehouse streams in a traditional.
They give their audience an option, right? Yeah. That's the beauty of it is if you watch the direct and you're either sold on the games or you're not sold on the games, you have an out to go and do whatever. They don't force it into the direct and have you slog through stuff that you're personally not interested in. But for everyone who's excited, you see Metroid Dread, you're like, yo, it's showing up at Treehouse. You can just stay on their stream and watch that. But they don't hold the audience hostage. It's an optional choice. It's great.
Yeah. So I personally, this is 10 out of 10. Nintendo saved E3, all the jokes. But from a critical perspective, a B+, A-, kind of depending on where you fall in the Nintendo IP thing. I definitely understand the WarioWare, or we didn't even talk about it, like Shin Megami Tensei 5, doesn't hit with everybody. But
that was their only gameplay presentation that I think went a little long, and that's kind of being hypercritical.
Yeah. It was a solid show all around, and really a great way to cap off E3 and from a consumer perspective.
For sure.
Now is the time. Now we get to the reason you're here, specifically. I want to sink our teeth into this. Xbox Bethesda Showcase. The way the show notes are structured here and the way I kind of want to talk to you about it is I want to talk about some of the games. Maybe I'll try to remember the order these were discussed in. That's actually what we have written down. It's probably fairly easy to do that. And then I want to get into the overall show and implications of everything they talked about, because this was dense and there's a lot to chew here with Xbox and a lot of implications, both for them as a company in the gaming industry, I think, as a whole, from a consumer and a business perspective. So they kick off the show. There's no Phil Spencer. I was super surprised that Phil didn't kick off the show. He did close it, but there was no t-shirt tease. Phil wasn't, we did not see or hear Phil until the end. Instead,
there was a t-shirt tease, just not by Phil.
Yes. Instead, Todd Howard comes out, kicks off the show, Starfield. First of all, in hindsight, kind of makes sense. They just spent $7 billion. You want to flex that. And Todd is on the level of a Kojima, a Miyamoto. Like, people, especially in the West, know Todd Howard. I've actually seen the man. He was at PAX East, and I passed him. He was going to some back
much
room.
Smaller than you think.
He is.
no slight to Todd Howard.
He's a much shorter man than you would think. And I'm not a very tall person. So, but he has clearly changed the course of games. He's had huge impact. Heck, he was on Apple's stage a few years ago to show off that mobile Skyrim game. Like, Todd is an undeniable force. So I understand opening the show with him is great. Starfield. They show off what I think could easily be misconstrued as a CG trailer. It was actually in-game, like they were using in-game assets engine footage, a tone piece for Starfield. And then they confirmed what I think everyone should have expected, that it is an Xbox and PC exclusive. You don't pay $7 billion and make the next big game and not an exclusive. So coming to Xbox and PC exclusively, sorry, PlayStation and Switch, I suppose, and Alexa, because that's where Skyrim is. And they gave us a date, 11/11/22. Jerrad, what did you think of Starfield?
So let me say, outside of From Software, Bethesda is one of my most beloved developers. Fallout 76 is what it is. It's a whole conversation for another day. I enjoyed Fallout 4. It did struggle from a lot of the issues many people had of it. Just wasn't innovative enough. It felt like more Fallout 3 in New Vegas, which is fine. Very good game in its own right. But for a studio like Bethesda, people expected more. I was super excited for this game. My favorite genre, period, in any form of entertainment is sci-fi, followed very closely by high fantasy. And I was excited for them to go into this because we've gotten the post-apocalyptic stuff, obviously, with Fallout. We have the high fantasy with Elder Scrolls. And this was their foray into sci-fi and hard sci-fi. Outside of the tonal piece, which I want to get to, there were some details that came out from Todd Howard, which he stated it's going to be a more hardcore RPG than previous Bethesda games. It can be played in first and third person, which is no duh, it's a Bethesda title. Mm-hmm. It's grounded in scientific reality, but is quote-unquote still a game. You talked about there's alien races and planets. It's very big. I'm super excited. I love the tonal piece because there's plenty of, and Bethesda's really good at this, there's gameplay teases. The gun that you see on the table, you see that there's a cautionary sign blinking, and, is it that the gun's jammed? Is it that the gun needs to be reloaded? Is it that, it's deteriorating? Like, you need to, maybe there's a degradation system where you need to heal your guns with parts that you collect. Mm-hmm. I loved that. It also makes me feel as if this game might have some Dead Space to it in that, or even Halo, for instance, where some of the gun-related UI isn't in the HUD, and it's actually in the gun in the gameplay, right? Where you can look at your gun and have feedback for if your gun needs to be reloaded, and it kind of helps with the immersion of being in the world. I'm very curious how No Man's Sky it is in terms of traveling to different planets. A question I brought up to my co-host on my podcast is, when you land on a planet, what approach are they going to have, Max? Is it going to be, you're going to enter into this densely populated city that's like a jaw-dropping experience? Or is it going to be more of a barren wasteland where there's points of interest, but it's more about the area as opposed to a condensed city? And I do think we might see a combination of that, where some planets are lesser along in terms of their societal and cultural structure, and it is more of a wild planet, whereas you might go to some other places that feel very Star Wars in that there's a centralized major city, and you get there and it's crazy and it's very unique to its own, it has its own politics. I'm very curious. The date was a surprise, kind of like with Elden Ring that I said earlier. The tonal piece was enough. Getting a date was icing on the cake. Having the date that far out, you can plant a flag in the ground that next year's E3, there's going to be the long Todd Howard presentation that he had for Fallout 4, where he's going to explain the mechanics, the ins and outs of the game, the intricacies, all of that stuff. I'm super excited for this, and the only reason it isn't higher on my list than Elden Ring is because Elden Ring comes out first. If it was the other way around, this would be number one. It hits everything for me. Bethesda Game Studios, sci-fi, I love their gameplay. My hope, Max, is that this game is closer to done than we expect in terms of it being game complete. And with the reputation Bethesda has of their games coming out, as great as they are, very buggy, a lot of issues. I hope that this entire year and a half, or as much time as they can, is them ironing out that stuff, and it's the cyberpunk effect. And, you know, it's an assumption, but I wonder if this game could come out spring of 2022 or late this year, but they decided, like, hey, let's just be super cautious. We're part of Xbox now. Halo's coming out. Forza's coming out. Let's just take our time on this. And the moment they figured that out, they're like, well, let's just set the date. Everyone wants that. Let's deliver it. We can do it earlier in the year, but let's try to put this game in the best place it can be at launch. And a tweet I had, I don't know if you saw this, the big thing I want from Bethesda in terms of their innovation and evolution as a studio, you know, alongside the bug fixes, is I want this to feel like the Outer Worlds or Mass Effect in terms of the companions. In Elder Scrolls and Fallout, you get companions, but they don't feel like companions. They feel like these mercenaries for hire that are with you for a bit. Maybe they die, maybe you lose them, and there's no connection there. I don't feel bad when that happens. I don't feel a connection to these characters. I want my companions, whether alien or fellow astronauts, to feel as if they matter. And adding that to the Bethesda dialogue systems that we already love, and just the storytelling and narrative and the worlds they build, could go a long way in making this a special game. And that's like my big ask, is I want the companions in this game to matter and feel like I'm building a relationship with them in an active way.
I think that that type of dynamic is essential for big, successful role-playing games. I mean, that's why people love Mass Effect. Heck, it's why people like Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door. It's the people that join you and you play with along the way. One thing Todd pointed out, and it's been well known for a while now, is, you know, this is Bethesda's first new IP, new world in, I want to say, 25 years. It's been a long time coming. They've, you know, done Elder Scrolls, they've done Fallout. And sure, they reinvented Fallout from, you know, the real-time strategy game to the RPG, open world RPG that it's well known for. Skyrim, still selling today, celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, which is just crazy to think about, that it's been around that long. I personally don't think it's going to hit the date. Logan says I'm crazy because he says, you know, Bethesda wouldn't give it a date if they weren't confident. And I'm like, I'm sure everyone's confident when they have a date, and I get the significance of 11/11. You know, that Skyrim was 11/11/11, right? That was Skyrim, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So like, I get the significance, but I feel like we should have seen some real gameplay. I get that it was in engine, and that's what the game, like, that's their tech. This is their new engine as well, correct? Or like, version
it's the Creation Engine 2. It's the first game on the new engine.
Right.
And funny enough, a lot of people saw the trailer and they saw that it was only going to be on next gen. But this isn't going to be the first Bethesda game that's next gen only. Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo are both PS5 only.
Right.
So
it is I'm really excited that they have a new engine, because I do understand that Bethesda games launch and they're buggy sometimes and things like that. Maybe not to the level of a Cyberpunk
all the time. They're buggy all the time.
Okay.
As somebody who loves their games, they always launch with bugs. You don't need to be that kind.
Well, I can't speak from firsthand experience, so I wanted to play a little bit softer ball there. But yeah, I'm really hopeful that this engine, I want to believe that a big reason it has taken this long for Starfield and will take so long for Elder Scrolls 6 is they really wanted this engine to be solid. And I'm really hopeful for that. And the trailer visually looks good, but I wanted some gameplay. And honestly, that was kind of
I think we're getting it at the Game Awards. I would almost bet money on Jeff's getting that, and we're getting game, or even opening night live for, that seems a little soon, but I wouldn't doubt if Keeley's already in talks to show the gameplay first at Game Awards, because that's a big pop.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things where Xbox did enough in the showcase with Starfield to get the headlines and the news beats. It's just another beat at the end of the year, you know, show off first gameplay of Starfield and own that news cycle.
And Xbox seems to be very friendly with the Game Awards. They revealed their Series X console at the Game Awards. Like,
Perfect Dark.
Yeah.
As well.
It is, Xbox is very friendly. I definitely could see that. That would be really exciting. Maybe I'm crazy, but I just wanted a little bit more to see for Starfield, because I feel like Starfield is riding off of reputation right now. And it's a really great reputation. Todd Howard, Bethesda, brand new RPG. Like, I mean, really, that's all you have to say. And tens, hundreds of millions of people will buy this game. It's not a hard sell. But I personally just wanted to see a little bit more. I was a little surprised that it was only like 3 minutes.
And I think it is the experience, right, of playing it, because if Kojima did the same thing and he had a tonal trailer for it, Kojima fans and people who have played his games kind of understand what some parts of the game will feel like, and they understand his perspective on it. And you would be a lot more hyped than I am, and I'd be like, well, I need to see gameplay, I need to understand what's going on. So the role reversal here is I'm so experienced with Bethesda that I kind of have a loose understanding of how this game is going to be, and that's what gets me excited. But for someone who has barely any touchstones with it, I totally get it of like, you know, sell me on this game. I'm unfamiliar with what I'm supposed to be expecting. I totally get that, and it makes sense. And that's the interesting thing with having experience with certain franchises, is that what the company can do in terms of an announcement or a showcase speaks volumes or silence depending on the individual. Yeah. And to your point, I don't think it was, even for somebody like you, I don't think it was a bad showcase, but you're just left wanting more. Like, show me gameplay. I want to know, like, just give me a little bit more. Left me hanging.
I agree. I completely. That is actually a really eloquent way to put it, because that's really how it hit me. I was just like, cool. And this also, ironically, this also leaked 30 minutes before the show, like super close. It was, I think the Washington Post pushed the button too soon. You got to wonder, like, when that happens, it's like, all right, maybe the Washington Post like intentionally pushed the button a little early, because
to get the clicks. For sure.
It is. Sure. That was a little too on the nose, but super exciting that they talked about it, and then Todd was gone, poof, into thin air. And then the show
into the ether.
Then he's going back to work on it, and then the show kicked into what I would argue the classic Xbox showcase pace of just game coming to Game Pass, world exclusive, all that stuff. The Xbox vibe.
Exclusive world premiere.
This wasn't the
thankfully no voices here doing that.
Yeah. So the second game, right, was S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, it's the follow-up. Well, so what actually happened is Todd Howard came out, did Starfield, then when that was done, Sarah Bond came out.
Oh, that's right.
Said, thank you guys for joining us. We have 30 games, 27 on Game Pass day one. We're going to start off with this one from our partners. She didn't say sorry. I'm saying sorry. I can't remember the name of the developer. And then they went into S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, pushing that it was going to be a performance powerhouse for the console. And this was incredible. As somebody who's not familiar with S.T.A.L.K.E.R but knows the legacy and how much people loved it, we knew S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 was coming to Xbox consoles first. They announced this last year at the Series X premiere presentation or whatever. I can't remember what they called it. But they announced it there that S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 is coming to consoles. This was awesome. It is, if you're familiar with the Metro series, it's essentially that. It's a post-apocalyptic Russia where you're dealing with... this takes place in Chernobyl, I believe, where you're dealing with radiation. I loved how beautiful this game was. I loved how it showcased ray tracing. This feels like a real, true next-gen experience for Xbox, and I'm excited about that. I mentioned before us recording that this is one of my favorite ways that a game has ever presented itself, where there's a dialogue between characters and then intercut with gameplay highlights, and then it would cut back to the characters discussing whatever they were. But it was humorously tied to what was going on. Like, they mentioned a lab, and then it cut to a very horrific, nightmare-inducing scene where the player was going through this dark lab-type area, and he runs into some alien mutated-type creature, and then it cuts back, and the character in the conversation says, wow, as, the people watching it said, wow. I love that it ended with the lightning dynamic weather effects that were happening on that giant, like, array-type structure. This is really cool. I believe this got dated for April 28th. I could be wrong about that, which was quite surprising. Let me double check my notes real quick because I don't want to misquote that. Yeah, April 28th. That's crazy. I didn't expect this to get a date either. And if that ends up hitting, that's a pretty good start to the year for Xbox gamers, where we're going to get Elden Ring, and then a few months later you're getting S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. I don't know if this one hits the date. And funny enough, I'm more confident in Starfield because it's Bethesda and their first party, as opposed to this being a partnership. I don't know if this gets pushed at all because it is the performance powerhouse. But I'm in. I love the Metro games. I love the commitment to using the Russian dialogue with the English subtitles. I know people who play JRPGs that will go in with the Japanese language and use English subtitles because it feels authentic to that experience. And people do that with Metro, where they go in with the Russian language because you want to see the artist's vision fully. And I don't know if I'm going to commit to it quite yet, but I do think this might be a circumstance where I do play with the Russian VO and English subtitles just because they presented it in that way. And it seems like the artist's true vision, and I think this game is going to be really cool. And quite a shocker. Going into this, there was a lot of games I wanted to see, a lot of games I expected to see. Stalker 2 wasn't one that I thought was going to sell me or be a brilliant showcase, and it was incredible, especially following Starfield. It caught a lot of people off guard in a good way.
This is my turn to take kind of the phrase you've used a couple of times this evening. I don't want to yuck anyone's yum here, but I thought this part of the show was far too long, and I didn't think this game looked good at all.
Interesting.
I personally, I thought it looked very brown, drab, and I guess maybe that's because it's set in this post-nuclear apocalypse kind of setting, but when that guy started dancing, I lost it. I was like, all right, I'm done. Like, get out of here. I don't want to... I just...
You didn't feel that was very Kojima-esque, though? Because that's something I could see in a Kojima trailer.
It just...
A very quirky character.
I mean, a quirky character, sure, but I just... This vibe was not clicking with me. I did like the commitment to the Russian dialogue and the English subtitles. I did actually really enjoy that. I thought that was cool. But the bouncing back and forth, like talking about a thing and then showing it, I didn't click with this. And maybe I was on Twitter too much. Maybe I was distracted with who I was talking to. It definitely didn't have my whole attention. And I checked out even harder when I wasn't enjoying what I was seeing. So maybe I didn't give, I go back, I give this a full fair shake, but I don't know anything about Stalker, so I definitely didn't know anything about Stalker 2. And this did not vibe with me at all. I thought this went on far too long. I was like, all right, let's go. Come on. Where's this pace that, Xbox typically has? And I was not sold on Stalker one bit. I was, and it's personal, I know, and I've heard a lot of people are actually very excited about this game or interested, like Logan. Logan's never played Stalker, but he's sold on the idea. He thinks this game looks really cool. So I know I'm in the minority on this one.
Shout out to Logan for being on my side on this one.
He's going to be on your side on a lot of this Xbox stuff, so don't you worry. We had a very fiery conversation afterward. This does kind of speak, though, to Xbox here. And we're going to talk about this kind of in the back half here. But this is a first on Xbox kind of exclusive situation. They are throwing money around, and they are getting games on their platform, bolstering this catalog, especially on Game Pass. And so I do applaud them for that. And they're going for it. They're really, really going for it. And I do appreciate that, both as a consumer and as someone who can, try to analyze this industry and stuff. So it was cool to see that. The next game, I don't think this was next, but I'm going to say it anyway. Somerville. I think Halo was before that, but I want to save Halo for a bit. So Somerville, one of the former Playdead guys found his own studio. I don't know the studio's name. I apologize.
Jump Ship.
Looks like Inside Limbo with The Last of Us, which on paper sounds like a Max Roberts kind of game. Very excited about this one, actually. Looks cool. Was getting major Playdead vibes, and found out later it was a guy from that team, so not surprising at all. What'd you think?
Yeah, I loved it. So I've been waiting to see Playdead's next project. I've been waiting to see Jump Ship. When they initially founded the studio, after one of the founders of Playdead had left, they showed a brief teaser image of, it looked like an English countryside, but there was like these monolithic spaceships in the back. And it was like, okay, it seems like it's going to be some type of alien invasion game. And then now we're finally getting a full reveal of this. Is really cool. I love the tone that they set with a lot of the gameplay clips. it's interesting that they weren't afraid to show characters without. So it's a family with a dog, 2 parents and a little kid. And I'm glad that they were willing to show that certain gameplay segments are going to have either the man by himself, the man with the dog, the family as a whole. Because, some people might consider that spoilery or whatever. I just think the family's going to get separated at some point. You're going to play as different people in that family setting.
Yeah.
It looks dope. I think this also has a date for 2022. This one I could easily see getting delayed just because indie game development, especially something like this that's pushing a very unique artistic style. Inside and Limbo are some of the most beautiful indie games to ever release, and it's really nice to see that this guy left the studio, founded his own thing, but still has that creative eye, and is lending it to another game. I mentioned, we have to wait 5 years between every Playdead title. It kind of sucks. With Jump Ship, that might not be the case, and we can get stuff that feels uniquely Playdead and now Jump Ship back to back in following years, or at least closer together than 5 years. I'm super excited about it. I'm curious to see what the whole narrative is and what these aliens mean, and if it has the same type of ending, no spoilers, as Inside.
Oh, goodness.
Or if it's something more definitive. I'm very curious about that, because both those approaches, depending on what the developer wants to do, I think can carry different weight in terms of their critical analysis and what they mean to the industry as a whole.
Yeah. I totally agree with everything you just said about this. I'm so curious, excited. It's good to have more games like this and also with a presumable level of quality that Playdead has had over their past, their 2 games. So it's really a great get for Xbox to have that on their stage. Did it say it was exclusive to Xbox or game? I know
coming first, I believe. Even
so,
Inside was exclusive at first, and then it came to PlayStation.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming this will eventually hit PS5, which is good for everyone.
Yeah, no, it seems very cool. I'm curious how the storytelling will be, because, Limbo and Inside are environmental storytelling. There's no words or dialogue, and this seems like it may possibly have that or be a bit more overt with his storytelling in a direct kind of way. Not to say environmental will be gone. It's just a different way to do it. And so I'm excited about that. And it's excited to see that. So let's talk about I don't know if there's an elephant animal equivalent in Halo, but the elephant in the room, the berserker, I don't know, whatever. Poor analogy. The elephant in the room.
The hunter in the room, I guess.
Hunter in the room that is Halo Infinite. I mean, I'm going to be straight up. What a disappointing showcase for Halo at E3. I was expecting a gameplay demo, either single player or multiplayer. Honestly, was expecting like a straight up multiplayer demo, not just the trailer they showed, which was great. Had the Halo stuff. Like, that's how you sell people on Halo multiplayer. But I was expecting a demo. I was expecting a date. All we got was holiday 2021. Like, what is this? I'm excited for Halo. I think the multiplayer looked dope. I think the show, like the behind the scenes 15-minute thing they had the following day, was really cool. Still not as much gameplay as I would have liked to see. Like, Jerrad, I don't think Halo's coming out this year. I think they want it to, and I think they're going to delay it again.
I was feeling that way based on the presentation, especially with them committing just to holiday. But following the conference with multiple sources saying that they're actually just kind of holding out for Call of Duty to square away a date makes sense, because this is the longest we've ever gone in a year without Call of Duty having a date for their game for the year.
That's fair.
And this year, the way Activision's doing it this year is they're announcing their next game in Warzone this summer. They've never done it this way before. They had an event last year in Warzone that had the first trailer for the game, but it wasn't revealed then. We knew about Black Ops Cold War for a while beforehand, and we live in a day and age where Warzone dominates the free-to-play space, Apex, Fortnite, and we can touch on Battlefield at some point in the hairy situation that's in. But with Halo being free-to-play, the last 2 games coming out and being kind of lackluster, despite what I would argue Halo 5 having the best multiplayer suite in the entire franchise's history. Obviously, the campaign was a low point, but the multiplayer, I think, was some of the best.
Absolutely.
I do agree with you partially on your feelings towards it. I think we saw way too little of the campaign. I wanted another gameplay demo. I think part of that is due to their hesitancy with the way everything was received last year and everything becoming a meme.
Just bring
Not
Craig
that disqualifies
back. Like,
it for
lean
it.
into it. Go, here's Craig now.
There is official things that there's going to be a Craig the Brute plushie, which I think will probably go on sale the moment we get the deep dive on this. Yeah. The 12-minute multiplayer thing that happened the day following, I think that was great. I love the way they're handling the lack of loot boxes and the battle pass system. I think they're nailing all of it.
All super smart.
As somebody who plays, one of the primary things I play on a day-to-day basis are live service shooters. I think they're nailing everything to a T. It's modernized for 2021. They get it, which is incredible.
Let's just mention it too. Multiplayer is free. Free
to play, not Game Pass.
Multiplayer, free to play.
It's crazy.
Like, I still can't believe it. No one has to go buy Halo to play the multiplayer. The only reason someone would buy Halo is the campaign this time around. And arguably, most people aren't going to... I mean, Halo is huge. Like, it will sell tons of if not hundreds of millions of copies. But, like, Game Pass is where arguably everyone's going to play it. And you don't even need Game Pass to play the multiplayer. It is free, which is astounding, and I think is a testament to Microsoft's wallet. Because...
Exactly.
I can't process this entirely. Like, Halo multiplayer free. Halo is a titan in first-person shooter space. I mean, it really is something that can go against Call of Duty and Battlefield. And I think we were talking about this before the show. Call of Duty Warzone, which isn't the full Call of Duty suite, like traditional, multiplayer that will come with whatever the game is this year. It's just the Battle Royale, which is great, and millions and millions of people play that. But to have everything in Halo just be free, and you can buy battle passes that never expire, so you can always buy a previous battle pass and you can change what you're working towards. And really what they're going to be selling are cosmetics, and that's fine.
And
that's
nothing earned in the battle
course.
pass. You can't pay for additional levels in the battle pass. You have to earn it through gameplay, which is huge. Because in other battle passes, in other games, if I'm at level 30, you're at level 50, I could pay X amount of dollars real world cash to level up to level 50 in the battle pass, and you can't do that in Halo either.
Which I appreciate. Halo is all about gameplay, and to keep that in line with the frankly necessary microtransaction and just consumer culture, especially when it is free to play, makes sense. And this is going to be huge. I think the numbers on this are going to be ginormous. And when you put this with Game Pass and xCloud, Halo Infinite can go against something like a Call of Duty mobile, except instead of it being a mobile game with bots and is different than Warzone, you are getting Halo Infinite wherever you go.
Another thing we haven't mentioned, the first time ever in Halo's history, it's launching day and date on PC, which is going to be incredible. That people are going to be able to play.
Yeah, the PC community is going to lose it for this. Honestly, most of the stuff we just talked about came out the next day. Like in the showcase, I didn't want them to spend 20 minutes on Halo and be like, and here's the behind the scenes of the multiplayer. Like that stuff later, perfect sense. Don't ruin the pacing of the show.
I think part of it though, Max, is that I'm still confident. I would say I'm 80-20 that it comes out this year, but I do think they're not fully confident in either A, when it's releasing, and B, if it's this year. And I do think if you do have that big gameplay showcase and then you end with holiday 2021, it kind of takes the winds out of it. And I know it's a weird thing to say, but if this game is coming out this year, I think by the end of July, we're going to get the announcement of Xbox's Inside Xbox, which is their monthly presentation thing. And I think that's where we're going to get the campaign and where we're going to get the extended multiplayer. I disagree a little bit in terms of enough gameplay. I think we did see a solid amount of it in both the presentation and in the following day for multiplayer. But it was quite shocking to not see anything except a pan over of the open world map for the campaign.
It was like, don't look too closely at Crag.
Yeah, I'd be lying to you if I said I was fully confident this game's coming out this year. But with the reports of them kind of strategizing around Call of Duty and their confidence in their multiplayer approach, I do think they do hit this year. The weird thing, too, that we haven't talked about is how much is the campaign going to be for Halo? Because it's launching into Game Pass. It's not going to have multiplayer. And with Microsoft's wallet and Phil at the lead, I could see them putting this at 40. Now, do I expect it to be 60? Sure. That's probably where it's going to be.
I mean,
but
think,
it's not confirmed.
Not that they couldn't change the price later, but my understanding is retail, they're selling it at $60. I'm pulling it up. $60 right now. And it does still say that it's launching on Xbox One and Series consoles, which I'm partially surprised about because I really think they should drop that, and we'll talk about this later. My hesitancy about it launching this year is twofold. This was supposed to be a launch title. This was supposed to be already out a year by the time holiday rolls around a year ago. And I understand COVID changed everything up for game development and everyone in the world. I get it. I understand the delay from last year. But to tack on an additional, like that game was supposed to be done last November. And then the other part is they gave Starfield a date. And we have seen the zero Starfield in the grand scheme of things. Like, one of those has to give. Either Starfield ain't making it or Halo. And the fact that they didn't give Halo a date, I feel like is Halo. And maybe I'm just maybe I'm being too bold on Halo's sake, but why should Halo be afraid or play around Call of Duty? Halo should be bold and proud and like, we are back, baby. Remember the Master Chief Collection and it launched and that was a mess?
Yeah, but we're in a different place, Max. Like, the last two Halos didn't do well. I mean, they reviewed okay.
I get it. At launch they didn't, but look at them now. Master Chief Collection is insanely incredible, from its multiplayer suite all the way up through the 4K updates for everything, on Series X and stuff. Halo 5's multiplayer is awesome.
But we're living in a world with Fortnite and Warzone. Like, the thing with Halo, Max, is that we're in. Me, you, Logan, all of these people of this older generation, we're in, especially with it being free to play. And yeah, free to play will bring in a lot of people, and it'll certainly bring in millions of people our age too, who maybe don't have the expendable income or don't want to purchase it. But what we have to look at is that Halo has lost the younger generation, right? It just has.
Are you saying that we're old? Oh, no.
We're old. I hate to break it to you, Max. We're old. And in order to bring kids in from Fortnite or even Warzone, because they're watching all these streamers,
gosh.
Nick Merckx and the like, playing Warzone all the time, they need to strategize accordingly, because kids and their attention span, you need to hit, and you need to hit strong, and you need to know how you're strategizing correctly.
Yeah.
And
you're right.
I don't think it's necessarily a thing where they need to avoid it by like a month, but they need to have enough time and space so where they can accordingly release it, hit on all grounds, have an excellent marketing thing. And the beauty of Halo coming out this year is that the rumors are that Call of Duty is going to be a World War II game, which is great for Halo. And I know it's not, even if it was a modern warfare type thing, I think Halo still strides well.
No,
but I do think because 343 has failed in the past, and Phil and everybody there, Joseph Staten, Bonnie Ross, everybody wants Halo to return, I think it's more than acceptable if it's not getting delayed. Obviously, we're talking with the preface of this is just they're strategizing around Call of Duty, for them to make the best decision for the franchise. Because it's a shooter that a publisher screwed up the launch of, and people now look back at it as like, oh, that's a niche darling that people should have played, but it got screwed over. Titanfall 2. Titanfall 2 came out day and day with Battlefield, and people forgot about it. It didn't sell well. It's kind of why Titanfall died as a franchise. But anybody who talks about playing that campaign understands it's one of the most innovative single-player first-person campaigns that has ever been released in the last probably decade. And that game went wash. And obviously, I'm comparing apples to oranges, but I do think they've seen the history of Halo. They understand that, honestly, Max, if 343 fails the campaign on this, I would not be surprised. And if it doesn't hit the way it should, the next Halo we see might not be developed by 343, especially with the host of first-person studios that Xbox now has under their wing. They have more than enough talent, and maybe it's in partnership with 343, but I do think this is 343's last chance to get it right as the sole developer of Halo, because it is this mega thing to us. And one thing I wanted to touch on real quick is people have this understanding that this next Halo should be this revolutionary thing in the way that God of War was. And I hate to break it to people, but shooters are a completely different animal than a single-player campaign. The reason why the talented studio, Sony Santa Monica was able to do that is because it's a very structured game, and they're able to have their full creative vision of changing that. Shooters just aren't that. Even the best shooters don't review the same way that single-player narrative-driven games do, because they're different animals. Yeah. There's different things that go into that you can't control on the same level that you can that type of game. So I kind of got frustrated with people expecting that from Halo. Halo will never be that. It can't never be that. I know you're not saying that. This is more talking to the internet in general.
Halo has a fantastic world and lore, and a big part of that is the what Bungie built in Left 4 343. And I'm in, I think, in the minority of really, actually, I enjoy the campaigns of 4 and 5. I do understand 5 subverted a lot of expectations, especially with their
marketing thing too, man. Yikes.
Yeah. I was funny while they were teasing a little bit of the single player. I was like, where's Locke? Bring Locke back. But I do understand not everyone loves what 343 has done narratively. And I do agree. I think they realize this is kind of they need to nail this one. But I'm not going to Halo expecting this phenomenally moving, grandiose, emotional story. It has those moments. Look at Reach. Look at ODST. Goodness gracious. ODST is so fascinating with the way it experimented with storytelling in a first-person shooter. But you got to have the gameplay that nails it, too. You've got to have that.
Yep.
And Halo can do it. Go play the Master Chief Collection. Halo has these levels that are just iconic. And I think they can do it. I have a lot of faith in that.
I'm happy, Max, that our concern is mostly with, is this game releasing this year or not? And God, this looks like a train wreck. And I know we don't have the full picture on campaign because it still could be that way.
Yeah.
But with the multiplayer, as little as they've shown, I have yet to hear from somebody that they're not sold on diving back in. And I think that's huge because you had to win over people. And the grappling hook, I think, is going to modernize it in a way that feels like it's adding to Halo and it's not just an addition for addition's sake. And I am fully confident that when the multiplayer releases, whenever that is, if it's this year or next year, is going to nail it, and it's going to run, and the battle pass is going to hit. I am just concerned with the campaign in terms of how it's going to work, because graphical fidelity, sure, is it not going to look next gen? People are concerned with that. I totally get that. My concern is what people aren't talking enough about is it seems like the narrative structure of this game is going to be different than Halo's past with these this big hub world. How is that going to play out?
Yeah.
And that's something people aren't really talking about in terms of will the campaign hit or not. They're mostly focused on, why aren't they showing this? Does it still look ugly? What's going on? And ugly is always funny, too, because I think the game still looked good. Obviously, it's not Ratchet level gorgeous, but I still think it looked like a AAA game for the most part.
I agree.
People were a little bit hyperbolic, as the internet is. But that's my interest in wanting to see the campaign stuff. Isn't that, is it still ugly? It's, what is this structure like? And that's what I'm curious about.
Same. I'm with you there entirely. I've looked at the clock. We're going to have to pick up the pace to hit a couple of the key things I wanted to talk about. But one thing that you mentioned about Halo that I just had to bring up, you've pointed out that we're old. I've also realized that children today will look at Chief on the box or on the Xbox dashboard, and they'll go, "That's the guy from Fortnite." And I kind of wept inside a little bit. So I'm excited for Halo. I was expecting a lot more at E3 this year, and hopefully, they do something here in the coming months, and it does hit this year. I really want to play Halo this year. It's why I have Series X is I want Halo. I want these big Xbox exclusives, and I'm upset because I care, and I can't wait to see more. Really quick, I have to mention Forza Horizon 5. I had heard nothing about this game. I am so excited that they're doing another one of these. I thought Motorsport was next. They're going to Mexico. It looks gorgeous. It's It's going to be playable at 4K 60 in a performance mode, or you can add ray tracing and dumb that frame rate down, I believe. Are you a Forza Horizon guy, or are you the motorsport type of racer?
I am not a car guy in general.
Okay.
But I play Forza because it's arcadey enough for me to enjoy. I love the new addition of the Forge mode, which, funny enough, we didn't talk about. Forge is going to be free for Halo 2, which is crazy.
Oh, my gosh.
That's part of the whole package. I'm excited for this. I really enjoyed Forza Horizon 4. England was a little drab, honestly. It's kind of like how you felt about S.T.A.L.K.E.R. It's like, yeah, a lot of browns and grays, and it's like, okay, whatever. This is exciting, especially as somebody who's from the state of New Mexico. I'm very familiar with the way the land looks in Mexico and the diverse nature of everything. It's beautiful. I would argue, based on their track record of how their games have reviewed, it's safe to say that Playground may be the best racing game developer in the world at this point in terms of consistency. It seems like they review so well. Even Turn 10 with Motorsport does well, but I think Playground kind of took over from Turn 10 in a way of being the premier racing game studio, and I think that the arcadiness of Horizon adds to that, where it's not a simulation as the motorsport stuff that's very much car guys.
Yeah, and you can tweak it and make it as simmy as you want. And kind of like what you said earlier in the show about From Software, kind of like pound for pound, the rate at which they put out games and the quality and consistency of them. Playground is that for racing games. Like, pound for pound, these guys crank out these games. The Xbox One had 3 of them, and now Forza Horizon 5. We've got 4 games.
And I think they all reviewed above a 90. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, they're incredible.
Which is incredible.
And they've gone to such cool and diverse places. Forza Horizon 2, I believe, was Italy. 3 was Australia. 4 was England. And now we've got New Mexico. I'm stoked. Can't wait for it. It's going to look gorgeous. I can't wait.
One thing people aren't talking about is I really think that Xbox acquiring Playground is similar to Insomniac in that I think the value of the purchase is insane, because not only are we getting these Forza Horizon games for Playground, we have Fable on the way, and I'm really confident in that becoming a franchise again, especially with the way they handle their level of detail and the way they develop games.
Yeah.
And we've seen how Insomniac puts out Miles Morales and now Ratchet, and they just hit on all cylinders. Incredibly talented. And I think Playground could easily be that for Xbox, just with having the premier racing franchise in the industry and an RPG that people have been dying to get back. And I'm thankful that they gave it to a London studio, an English studio, because you need to nail that humor. And Forza Horizon 5, I'm going to be honest with you, Max. I'm going to download it on Game Pass. I'm going to play it for a week or 2. Never going to touch it again. Yeah. And it's not no discredit to the quality of the game. I'm just not a car guy. Never have been, never will be. But I'm so excited because playing this is like, I can't wait to see what they do with Fable. I cannot wait.
Yeah, it is.
November 9th, by the way, too, is I think when Forza hits.
And that's another game. Great example. Announced, revealed, gameplay, out in 6-7 months. Great. I'm pumped. Can't wait.
Game of the show, in all honesty,
seriously,
for Xbox. Just because of all of that. Gameplay demo, release date.
Yeah, between that and Metroid Dread, I'm on cloud 9. Like, I've got these. It's great. It's so exciting. All right. I've really got to pick and choose here. And I want, there were other things announced. There was like Redfall, which is from Arcane, which looks like a Left 4 Dead vampire shooter. Interesting, cool to see a new Arcane game. They didn't even mention Deathloop or Ghostwire Tokyo, which I thought was interesting because those are coming to PlayStation first. But if I really, looking at the list here and looking at the clock, there's one thing I want to talk about with you, and that's Game Pass.
Okay.
And the value of Game Pass. I've been seeing this everywhere, all over the internet. Game Pass is crazy. You'd be nuts not to get an Xbox and Game Pass. Like, pound for pound, Game Pass is the best deal in gaming right now. Everyone needs Game Pass, Game Pass, Game Pass, Game Pass. And I'm over here as someone who...
I saw your tweet, Max. I saw your tweet.
As someone who has Game Pass, I converted like 2.5 years right before Series X because I thought Halo was coming out and I was getting a Series X. So, I still have a year or whatever left. I haven't touched my Xbox since launch and I played Ori. My brain has been wired where I play my PlayStation is where I play my third-party games. And maybe that's something I have to pivot. made me personally like to truly see kind of get the value out of this. But my Xbox is my exclusive machine. And a lot of the games, both shown in the showcase and just kind of what's out right now, don't speak to me from Xbox's audience. I am a mostly single-player, narrative-driven game, focus, third-person action or puzzle, like that kind of game. And Xbox doesn't have a ton of those necessarily. I'm very excited about Perfect Dark. We didn't see anything about that. I'm very curious about Indiana Jones. Obviously, that's in pre-production, early development now. You know, there's a lot of promise here. But Game Pass, like everything coming to Game Pass, especially the first-party stuff, just makes sense because they own it. And it's a subscription, and everything's a subscription now. But, like, it doesn't do it for me. If I was paying month to month for Game Pass right now, I would cancel it. Honestly. And it's not because I don't think it's a good value for most people, but I just don't play these games. And, like, I would just buy Forza. I would just buy Halo. And, you know, and that's my 2 games or whatever before I get to the $180 a year. And, you know, some of these smaller indie games, Somerville, that's not a $70 game. Not to say that its quality is not of that, but it honestly will be sold for anywhere between $20 and $40. 12 Minutes, another game I'm jazzed to play out in August, or Psychonauts, a game I'm very curious about. But Game Pass doesn't speak to me or my wallet. I kind of think of it like HBO Max. If HBO didn't say all their movies were coming out this year, 2021, day and date with the theater, I would have canceled HBO in like November, December of 2020. I just wasn't watching anything on their platform. And then they found a way to entice me to stay. And good for them. They keep getting my $16 a month. And just Xbox doesn't have that our movies are coming day and like they don't have the movies I want to watch, to keep the analogy going. And the date for the movie I want is like, maybe it's coming out this year, and you know, I still have what's carried over, but maybe it's just I mean, it is just me and my taste in gaming, and Xbox doesn't have necessarily that diversity yet. They have bought a lot of talent to give us that diversity, but we're still waiting for it. But like, I don't know, when they're like Game Pass won the show, I'm like, did it? I don't know. What do you think? I just kind of had a Game Pass.
So I like to rebuttal. So
please.
I can't disagree with your choice in games because it's your choice in games, obviously. And to your point with HBO Max, I think it's a good analogy, and I was actually going to bring that up of like, I don't subscribe to every subscription service because I'm not interested in what they have. And, you know, the beauty of Xbox is that you can technically buy a game for $15 whenever you want, Max, because if you subscribe for a month of Game Pass, you can play that game for that month. And especially somebody like you who's only really into single-player games, right? It's a little bit different when people are into multiplayer. You can get in, get your experience for that month, and get out. And obviously, who knows if you want to replay the game or own that game. The difference with HBO Max and other subscription services, Max and Game Pass, is that you cannot have Game Pass and still buy Forza day one for $60, right? Yeah. With those movies, there's a lot of weird things with them. Okay, it's coming 2 weeks after it's in theaters. Or, no, you can't purchase this outright. You have to subscribe to HBO Max to watch it. We're not going to put it out as a rental.
Or you rent it. You rent it digitally for $20 or $30 or something. You don't even own it later. So,
and which you could do with Game Pass, where you quote unquote rent a game that's coming out right for a month for $15, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And to your point with $180 a year, let's say for all intents and purposes, Halo comes out this fall, Redfall comes out in the summer, and Starfield comes out 11/11/22, right? And I want to touch on, I think part of your hesitancy with this too is because you're not super sold on any of those release dates actually hitting, which I completely understand. Say you get Game Pass in November, you buy it for the year, and you get all 3 of those games, okay? Halo's going to be $60. It's weird with the free-to-play. Just let me get this
it's
example.
$60 at retail if I were to play it.
Yeah. Starfield, $60. We're assuming Redfall, $60, obviously the new Arcane title. The $180 pays for itself, really, right? Yeah. Because that's 3 games you would have purchased. Obviously, we're assuming you're interested in those games. You're buying them day one. Pays for itself right off the bat. Then, throughout the months, they're adding and removing games. And of course, with any subscription service, you know how much crap gets added to Netflix I have no interest in? But when something catches my eye or something catches my eye that I never knew about gets on there. And I come to it from the perspective of, Max, and you may have been similar. I grew up with a single mom. We didn't have a lot of expendable income. Mm-hmm. I got at max maybe 3 games in a year, and that was like a great year, right? We didn't have money for a lot of video games. If Game Pass existed when I was a kid, I would be thrilled. And it goes back to the Halo thing of us being, old and kids being around is kids aren't like us. Kids have different attention spans, and I think it's great for those type of gamers where you can hop in, hop out, try a bunch of games, get in, get out. And for parents who can't afford to buy their kids all these $60 new releases, I think it's incredible that they can spend $15 a month. Maybe the kid earns it through chores or whatever the whole system is for them. And that kid has access to all these games, and they don't feel left out in social situations at school. And they get to play all of these really dope stuff and they get to develop an interest in video games, and not just with Call of Duty or Fortnite. They get to try roguelikes and puzzle games and all of these weird things, right? And develop an interest in indie titles and have a collective-based system where they're buying these weird odds and ends and doing all of this stuff. Somebody like you, who, you love the Naughty Dog games, you love the single-player stuff, I totally get why Game Pass doesn't work for you, because a lot of it's weird little indie stuff, and even the genres you like aren't necessarily the genres they put into Game Pass often, right?
Yeah.
And just because you're not interested in it doesn't mean it's not a good value, doesn't mean they didn't present it very well and sell it on stage.
Absolutely.
It just means that Game Pass doesn't speak to you, and that's completely fine, right? I could be like, none of the games outside of Advance Wars and the Breath of the Wild teaser spoke to me in Nintendo. That's fine. It wasn't solely for me. Mm-hmm. And with subscription services, it's going to be the case. There's so many of them. First of all, financially, you shouldn't subscribe to all of them.
Oh my gosh, it would be
you're going to put yourself in debt. I get it from your perspective, but I would agree with the people who said that Game Pass really delivered in this show. And for me, as somebody who enjoyed most of the content in this show, if I wasn't a Game Pass subscriber, I would still be stoked because a lot of the content spoke to me. And I guess that's the thing is, maybe you're also coming at it from, not everything spoke to me, in addition to Game Pass doesn't work for me as a consumer. And I wonder if Halo did hit last year, and maybe another game you're interested in hit this year, you might feel different about it. And part of that is, we talk about this, Xbox hasn't hit its stride yet in first parties. And we had a report talking about that they want a major release every quarter, right? They want 4 games a year into Game Pass. And once that stride hits, according to Jeff Grubb and other people, there's a crazy schedule for 22 and beyond into 2023. I think that's when they'll be better at pulling in you. Because right now they're not trying to pull in you, they're trying to pull in me, right? But I do think they're working towards pulling in you with everything they've done. So I don't think it's surprising that you're not into Game Pass right now, but I do think in 2 years' time, it'll be a bummer if Halo hasn't done what we expected and they are making you question whether or not you continue a subscription or subscribe, right?
Yeah.
Dom, my co-host for the podcast, doesn't subscribe to Game Pass. What he does do, though, is whenever a new first-party game comes out, he subscribes for that month, hops in, plays it, and hops out. And it works for him. And, subscription services aren't based on that consumer. They're based on me. They're based on the person that has 3 years purchased out or somebody who has auto-renewal on. And
they're based on people like me who have it, and they're hoping I forget and keep the renewal turned on, and I just haven't touched it.
Yeah, and I just, for me, it's such a value because of the perspective I had growing up and what it would mean to me to have that as a kid. And removing myself from that, additionally, I do think there's value there because, unlike you, I have a pretty wide interest in weird indie games, and I download, whenever they have a new announcement, I download almost guaranteed one of those games. Do I play to completion? Not all the time. But I try to give a game that I'm interested in at least an hour of my time to see if it clicks. And more often than not, Max, for me, they do. And I get to play an experience I didn't think I was going to have. And waiting between these major releases, it gives me time to play stuff where I don't have to commit to, man, I started that game, but do I want to go back in from the beginning? Do I want to jump into the middle of a save? Do I want to relearn the systems? Do I have time to fit this 30-hour RPG into my life? Or do I hop into Game Pass? What looks cool? What looks fun? You know what I mean? That's why it speaks to me.
It sounds like Blockbuster, kind of, to me. Again, I guess supposed to age myself. And it's like window shopping on the Xbox dashboard. You're window shopping for a game to play. And you're right. They haven't necessarily brought in the second and third party games that would draw me in per se. Now, I'll say this. Back 4 Blood, that's come to Game Pass day one. And, you know, myself, Mike, and Logan, like, we've talked about playing this game ahead of time, and now it's coming to Game Pass. Like, that's just where we're going to play it. Now
that you have Game Pass, you don't have to worry about purchasing it, right?
Yes.
There's no... If the game's bad, which I don't think it will be, but if the game's bad, there's no worry there because it's already a subscription you have, and you can jump and run, and there's not this thing of like, man, I really spent $60 for that and I didn't enjoy it. I should have done more research. Or, man, we bought this game and we kind of duped our friend into getting into it and, you know, none of us played it and they're on the hook. That's the tough thing too. And the weird thing is, say me, you, and Logan, we're going to play Back 4 Blood, right? Me and you have Game Pass, say Logan doesn't. All of us are like, yeah, we're committing to playing this game. Me and you get it for free with Game Pass. Logan pays $60. None of us like it. He had to pay $60. We did it,
right?
Which is the bummer there. You know what I mean? That kind of sucks. And so there's a weird thing there of like you kind of want to have your friends have Game Pass too, so you can all commit with the same level of, what's the word I'm looking for? Investment, right? So that way somebody doesn't feel jaded by
financial investment.
Yeah,
I can see it. I see the future. The other part, and this isn't again personal. I'm definitely a physical collector, consumer of all media, and I haven't entirely wrapped my brain around not owning
all digital future.
Halo or not owning Forza, and that's a personal barrier I have to get over. But I don't own every movie I've ever watched. I don't own every game I've ever played, so there's wiggle room there. I really, Xbox has done so much in the last generation, rebuilding their image and getting to this point and building, frankly, Google's tried it, Amazon's trying it, streaming services. That's the future here. xCloud, Game Pass. Like those two together are the future of Xbox. They just announced today, the day we're recording, xCloud is coming to Xbox One, which to me was like the most obvious thing they would do forever. I've been talking about it on the blog for years now. Today's post I put up, I was like, and here's where I talked about it there, and here's where I talked about it there. It just makes sense. You have an Xbox One S, like my father-in-law, suddenly he subscribes to Game Pass. He theoretically could have access to Xbox Series X levels of performance on an Xbox One S because it has native 4K output for video, which is what a game streaming is. I see the potential, and they went on the shopping spree. They bought a ton of studios, diverse talent, and not only that, they've built at least one studio with the initiative. They're building it from the ground up. That sounds like they're making a game that is like my speed personally. And I guess it's just a longer waiting game. We still have to wait for these games to come out, just we have to wait for the initiative to finish their thing. We got to see Gears, the Coalition's working on the next Gears game. They switched to Unreal 5, which will look incredible. It is.
Well, funny enough, their next game is a non-Gears project.
See, even that. So new IP, like they have the right idea and they're moving in that direction. They're not where I want them to be yet. And then that reflects back on Game Pass and my perception of it.
Yeah, but
I'm curious how many average, because I don't hear a lot of people, and I know we have to wrap up. I don't hear like a lot of the casual people I know talk about Game Pass. And I wonder when that moment's going to happen, when I'm going to hear someone talk about, oh, I subscribe to Game Pass, or you should get this on Game Pass, or you should just sub to this. I know they're out there. They haven't entered my circle yet. And I'm waiting for that day, because to me, that communicates mass market breakthrough. And I know they have the numbers. Like, I know it's a thing, but when it hits my circle, that's when I will be like, haha, this is a success.
The biggest concern with Game Pass was, what do developers get out of it? Like, what's the, and what we've seen is games are selling better for developers. They put it into Game Pass, and through word of mouth or people leaving Game Pass and buying the game outright, they're seeing really good sales numbers, which is important because there's the whole worry of like, if everything is on Game Pass, how are indie developers going to thrive and what's going to go on there. To the xCloud thing, Max, with it coming and you being able to play next gen only games on your Xbox One, I really hope this is something that PlayStation does with, because they've partnered with Microsoft with their Azure servers, right? And whether it's through PlayStation Now or something, I really hope they do something similar, because we're in a place like, Max, I want to play Ratchet right now. I want to play Returnal right now. I can't get my hands on a PS5. I just can't. And I'm somebody who's kind of into, like, deals and seeing stuff, and I could just imagine how hard it is for the average person. And I want to be able to play these games on my PS4 in some capacity. I want others to be able to do it. Same thing with Xbox. And I do think it's a best of both worlds in that people who can't afford or can't get their hands on the new next-gen consoles and developers who can focus solely on the next-gen experience both benefit, because more people will play those games and developers don't have to worry for developing for older systems, and it's the best of both worlds. And I think it's going to be a crime if PlayStation doesn't have something similar, and if Xbox doesn't nail this when it happens. I'm just glad it's an initiative they're striving towards. Phil Spencer's like the greatest thing to happen to Xbox.
Yes.
They were in such a bad place in 2013. I know it's a retread territory. And I think another person who doesn't get enough credit is Satya Nadella. When he took over,
He was going to kill it.
the shareholders basically told him to kill Xbox, right? And thanks to him and Phil Spencer getting on the same page and understanding that they need to invest to be able to play ball with PlayStation and Nintendo, they backed that up. They put their money where their mouth is, literally, and they invested. And it's great to see them. They're not at the point where we want to be.
I'm curious how long they can invest like they are right now, financially. I mean, I know $7 billion is a lot for Bethesda. I get that. But paying out for like getting big games day one, like Back 4 Blood and other big second, third party games day one on Game Pass, I'm wondering how long that train will ride. But that's just something we're going to have to see over time.
Well, and it depends on something that people often misconstrue too, is they talk about the Netflix model of how can Netflix afford to do this? They're in so much debt. Is Game Pass going to be the same way? And what people don't understand is that, Xbox has its own internal studios that are building games for Game Pass, but a lot of the deals they're doing aren't games that they outright funded, right? They're paying for it, but it's a completely different situation.
They're just paying for rights. They're paying for rights for a certain amount of time. Initially, they're paying up front. It really, to somewhat tie it to PlayStation, it kind of is. They're taking what I'm trying to say. Rocket League, PlayStation Plus, day one. That was like Rocket League launched, and it was on PS Plus, same day and date, and it was free for everyone for a month. And I think that's a similar mental model, because PS Plus is a subscription, just like Gold is a subscription. It's kind of like a dip in the water. And Rocket League now, not that Rocket League is, I think actually Rocket League is free to play now that I say this, but anyway, it's that times months and months and months and months and months. Eventually the games will go away theoretically, but it's paying more upfront possibly, and like having games with a longer tail and all of that stuff. It's very fascinating to watch. It's unique, it's different, and it definitely shows that the future of Xbox is not an actual box, but a platform, a service. And no one else is doing that.
I wanted to
right
say
now.
something real quick. So with PlayStation Now, they have a similar system where they put first-party games into it and then they rotate out, right? And that's the bummer to me, is that like they put them in for like 3 months and they rotate out for a different selection of games. Whereas with like Game Pass, you know that all the first-party stuff is going to remain in there.
Forever.
Yeah, Outriders or all of these other weird titles are going to be in there for a bit and then go away. But at least there's always going to be that definitive library. And to your point of them building everything, we're finally for years we were waiting, like, when is Xbox going to hit their stride? When are they going to get moving? We're more so in that the gun just got pulled to start the race, and they're at the beginning of the race before we were waiting for the race to even begin. Like we're like, when are they going to get lined up? When are they going to get prepared? When is this race going to start? And now they're starting up in the race. And I think in 2022 they're going to start hitting their stride, and then 2023, according to reports, they're going to be in a full sprint. And I think at that point, Game Pass will be justified to so many more people, because it'll have the catalog of not only all of the indie stuff or even the AA Xbox stuff from Double Fine and all of these studios. It's going to have these premier AAA games that feel like exclusives that are worth being proud of on a system, that are similar to the level of polish we get from the God of Wars and the Uncharted. And I think that's part of it. Is it's cool to see that all the first party games for Xbox are coming to Game Pass, but we haven't seen the premiere stuff yet. So once all that stuff starts coming in, I think it'll build internal value for Game Pass to where it's seen as more of what they're pitching it as, and not this pipe dream with some dope stuff on it as it currently is,
I can't think of a better way to wrap up the show. not because it's almost time to go, but that was a really great way to put it, and a solid way. I really genuinely can't think of a better way to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much, Jerrad, for joining me on this episode. Please plug away, my friend. Tell the people where they can find you and your work online.
So I host a weekly video game podcast where we cover news and everything happening in the industry with my co-host Dominic Orlando. The name of the podcast is the Controlled Interest Gamecast. You can find us on any podcast service. Just search that up and you'll see us. We'll pop right up. You can go to YouTube, search the same thing. All of the podcasts get uploaded as video podcasts there as well. If you want to follow us on social media to get updated with all of those posts for the podcast, on Twitter, we are CTRLINT. It's Controlled Interest abbreviated. On Instagram, it's just Controlled Interests. If you're interested in me and maybe not my podcast, or you want to follow both, personally, my Twitter is at Jerrad Wyche. That's JERRADWYCHE. I tweet about video games. I tweet about Marvel stuff. I tweet bad takes about stuff as well. Pretty good follow, I think. Tweet more about sports than your average video game person, but I try not to fill my feed with too much of that because I understand the audience. But yeah, if you want to follow, like I said, weekly podcast. Thank you, Max, for having me. Anytime I have a chance to talk to you of video games, especially post E3. We've been doing this for so many years at this point, it just feels like home. So I was glad that I got the invite, and I'm happy to talk Nintendo and Xbox with you anytime.
It's practically a tradition at this point. And listeners, links will be in the show notes for those Twitter accounts and places that Jerrad just mentioned. So be sure to check it out. You can follow me on Twitter at MaxRoberts143. You can find my writing over at maxfrequency.net, as it's my site and blog where this show is hosted. You can also check out my new seasonal podcast with Logan Moore, Chapter Select. Season 1 is going on right now. Actually, day we're recording, episode 2 went up. Season 1 is focusing on Paper Mario. Logan and I choose a series of games, and we bounce back and forth through their entries to explore their design, evolution, and legacy. So season 1 is all about Paper Mario. And episode 2 just came out, all about the Origami King, so check that out. And if you're curious about the history of Naughty Dog, you can check out Chasing the Stick over on Max Frequency as well.
Listen to it.
It's their whole history during the PS4 era, essentially the history of The Last of Us Part 2 and its development, but Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy and even Last of Us Remastered, which history may be repeating itself soon with the rumored remake. But we'll see if that ever comes to light. It most likely will. So thank you for listening. I hope you all enjoyed. And until next time, adios.